Click each one of those, there you go. Click that, okay. So we got the video, and let's see if we can get. That's on.
Okay. But it's not moving.
Can you see the?
It doesn't move.
Oh,
here we go.
oh, got it, okay.
Thatcher.
There we go.
Yeah, so that's
So you started.
23 and then that, okay, so then. Yeah. Cause, no, this is the.
Couple minutes.
50.
Now Zorian shows up.
50. Yeah, the difference between the two, when.
You just showed up.
And
Then subscribe.
you add another 50.
I think we climbed up on the chair.
Here's something.
I
Cannot reach that. I would even share it.
Look at the lattice on the lattice.
This falls into your. This falls into your.
There's a sound.
There we go.
Zoom in.
Yeah.
Can you zoom?
The board can show you, but it's actually a lot of people down I'll give it a shot. I'm gonna try.
Okay.
Okay, that's good, thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Scott, if you want a job.
Yeah, and
All right, Robin, are you ready?
Yes, sir.
All right.
It doesn't buy you any concessions, Scott.
I understand. Just like mine, you can.
150 feet.
Okay, so we have Scott with us tonight. What we wanted to do tonight was to discuss the typing of this project, whether it's gonna be a type 1 or unlisted.
Or the.
They're not paying attention.
So the.
Can I have everybody's attention, Helena? Right? I don't like using them, but I do it.
I love it. Throw the gavel.
All right, so last time, we had our attorney suggest that this was an unlisted action. Went through the rationale for that. I'd like him to go through it again to remind everybody. And we deferred making any decision last time because we wanted to have Verizon here to, if they disagreed with how our attorney is coming out on it, had a different approach, whatever, or would like to speak in support of whatever our attorney said last time. So I'm going to start with Dave Gordon to just summarize again why, what type he believes this should be typed.
Let me explain. In general, typing an action is not a particularly difficult or even discretionary matter. There are two lists in the DEC seeker regulations. There's a type 1 list and a type 2 list. And those lists are essentially lists of categories of actions. Typically, type 2 is really a lot of categories. Type 1 is a lot of thresholds. So an action bigger than a certain threshold, like 500 cars, for example, is a type 1 action. And so it's not that hard to do. And in fact, what I'd actually advise the board to do is to stop even voting on it because it's not discretionary. And I don't want you guys to vote on something that we're essentially telling you what it is, but you're not going off of any knowledge. We can typically tell you what the type is and you can move on and do things that, you know, you're exercising judgment for. Some of the categories at times do have, just the way it did, because it's all words, right? They're all structured in some ways that at times things can be somewhat discretionary, or there can be cracks where we will ask the board to make a judgment. And this is one of those cases. And what we have here is a type 1 category, which arguably could apply, and the counsel for one of the citizens has urged us to apply it here. And the question for us now, so this will go to the board, because there is a decision to be made here. And I can explain to you sort of what it is, and we can also look at and we wanted to hold off for reasons I'll explain, to see what the applicant thought about it. And we now have the applicant's opinion on paper, and Scott is also here to discuss it. So here's what the category says. What it says is, and this is about height. This is specifically a type 1 category that is looking at the height of a structure. And what it says is, any structure that's more, and I'm just paraphrasing off the top of my head, so I can go back and actually read it, but which hopefully is close enough. Any structure that's more than 100 feet high in a town or a municipality that does not have a zoning ordinance. And the first thing, and at the time this was written, and perhaps even now, there are towns in New York State that, believe it or not, don't have zoning ordinances at all. But the way I've always interpreted this is that it doesn't have an applicable zoning ordinance. So if it has a zoning ordinance, but no restriction on height, I think that would still qualify. So the real question is, does this town have an applicable zoning ordinance on height? And just the natural way to look at it is it does. And therefore, based on what I'll call the black letter, it shouldn't apply. Now, here's the sort of the other side of the argument, which have you people, has everybody seen Bob Berg's argument in his first, it's one of his,
Yeah.
in his litany, it's one of his,
Well, there were 3 letters. The first
it's in
one
the first
dealt,
letter, right? Or
well, the first letter was one that dealt more about environmental conditions. The second letter, the notable thing about the second letter was the pictures of the osprey nests up in the antenna. And the latest letter, I'll call it the third letter, dealt with environmental issues, but also again with the issue of typing it, either one or unlisted. And he mentioned both height, but he also pulled out or suggested that because of significant environmental issues, it should also be a type 1 in his opinion. So that's what it's.
So the first thing to understand again is that the type of an action does not relate in any way to the evaluation of the significance of the action. It's really just typing it, and then it may load into it may ultimately become a factor in determining significance, but you don't need to know you don't have to go through the whole evaluation of whether an action is good, bad, or otherwise before you get to the typing. Now, what it really comes down to is what I sometimes call the shiny object theory of law, which is that if there's a whole bunch of factors, what judges sometimes do, particularly if they're not that sophisticated on the particular issue, is they'll grab a shiny object that's one of the facts of the case. And in this case, the shiny object, quote unquote, is the number, because numbers are very understandable and predictable. And here the number is 100 feet. And so Scott's coming in with a tower that is at least 145 feet high, depending on how we want to consider it. You may actually want to think of it as even higher than that because of the allowable extensions, but it's certainly 145 feet. And so that's clearly more than 100 feet. Every second grader knows that. Shiny object, it should be type 1. But then you get to the second part of the standard, which is in a town that doesn't have a zoning ordinance. Well, part of Berg's argument is that's just all a bunch of words. It doesn't really matter anyway. And an argument which I can explain and I actually disagree with. He's saying the real thing here, this is all about environmental impact. It's all about height. Just ignore those other words. So we can take that wherever we want. And that's essentially what his argument boils down to, is that this is a big deal. It's 145 feet high. The number there says 100. That's a very shiny object, type 1, and we've got all these other problems too.
Okay, so let me just stop again. I want to make sure that I understand it. If it's over 100 feet and you don't have
In a town without
in
a
a town,
zoning, without a
then
zoning
it's a type
ordinance.
1.
Yes,
We do have a town code that describes how to handle the height of a tower.
yes.
And it gives very clear descriptions of how to handle it.
But there's a argument, if you want to get into really kind of playing lawyers games, at the end, there's a slight extension here because they're going for a waiver from that, right? And so at the end of the day, if we grant the waiver, are we now in a town that doesn't have a zoning ordinance? So again, we can take that wherever it goes. So that's why this becomes somewhat discretionary. Before we get into figuring out where we want to go on this, I want to point out the 3 options for the board. One is to just say it's unlisted, and because we read English and that's what it says. The other is to say it's type 1. Again, we can read English and that's what it says. We want to be careful. that's a more cautionary thing to do, because if you declare something unlisted and it turns out a judge who may not have all the focus that you guys have on land use cases, may not, be an expert on this and looks at it and is a devotee of the shiny object theory, which happens a lot. He's gonna say it's type 1, and that can be a factor in overturning the approval. If there's an approval and it's opposed and it goes up, and this problem is in the record, it's usually not the only factor. In a really bad case, it could be, but it could be one of the factors that a judge usually say, we screwed this up. And so the third way we could approach it is to say, we really think this is unlisted. The language says it's unlisted, but in an abundance of what lawyers sometimes call an abundance of caution, we're gonna treat it like a type 1. We're just gonna do everything that a type 1 action requires, which is largely a long form EAF. It's coordinated review, a couple of other things, and those are really the three choices before us. And when I looked at this a couple of weeks ago, my first thought was that's what we ought to do, because this is a sort of thing that does have this layer of complexity and judgment to it. And there's a certain, safety factor in trying to, say you're going to treat it the other way. And then I thought, it's a clearer case than that. It probably ought to be just an unlisted. That was my opinion. Again, this is going to be your decision. So you do not need to listen to me or to credit what I'm saying. Ultimately, we will, because this is more of a judgment call, I will throw this out to you. But then what we thought was, the planning board's job is to make these decisions as best it can and to let the chips fall where they may. This risk assessment analysis that we put ourselves at more risk of an annulment is really an issue more for the applicant. It's the applicant that's going to have this thing. Our job is to make our best judgment. If there's a quote unquote risk to it, that's for the, so we thought, we want to hear what the applicant thinks about this risk, this judgment call and this risk. And it's great that Scott's here to discuss it, but even before he's here, he sent us a long letter explaining what his judgment was. And the other thing is, Scott's an experienced cell tower lawyer, and so he's seen this. I was pretty confident he's seen this before, because most cell towers are more than 100 feet. So he's been through this game before and wants to know what he thought about it. He told us what he thought about it in the letter. I'm not sure if you guys have had a chance to read it, but he was very clear, essentially echoing what my thoughts were, which is that just look at the black letter, that this is unlisted action. It does not fall into that type 1 category, because we are in a town that does have a zoning ordinance, et cetera. I would add one other thing. If there is a kind of a tacit argument that, well, he's trying to get rid of the zoning, the applicable zoning code here, which is that if, for those of you who may have forgotten, the zoning code here is the maximum height is 50 feet above the tree line, which is roughly here 95 or 100 feet. So there's a substantial exceedance here. But as they apply for that waiver, that puts that before this board as to whether, in our judgment, whether or not it's worthy of the waiver. And I want to also point out, that's why I disagreed with the point that Berg made, the lawyer for the citizens, when he said, the important thing here is the 100 feet. The zoning thing here is just a bunch of words. The DEC is, in this particular category, the DEC is trying to do more than just define the size of the action beyond which it thinks is going to be a type 1. What it's really trying to do, and because in his letter, he basically says it's really meaningless. What he's really trying to do is to ensure that it gets reviewed. And if one of those towns that doesn't have a zoning law, or doesn't have an applicable zoning law, there's no limit in the zoning law on this. And so you're never sure whether it's going to get adequately reviewed by the town. If the town has a zoning law, the theory is it's going to be reviewed at least under zoning in one form or another. They were originally going to go for a variance. In that sense, the ZBA would have looked really hard at that issue, right? In this case, it's going to get reviewed by us as part of the waiver analysis, which we're going to talk about in more detail. So this height exceedance will be reviewed by the town as even separate from seeker. It will be reviewed as our analysis of the waiver. And that's why I think that phraseology really becomes important, in my opinion. And again, the lawyer for the citizens tried to dismiss that, but I think that it is important. And I think that's why ultimately that would carry the day, that it's not language that we can just ignore. Having said that,
So let me just make a couple of comments. The letter from Scott is in the Google file under correspondence and emails. It just came in today, so I loaded it up this morning, so it's there. The letter from Berg is actually in the folder or file called public comments. And
April-
I forget when
April
that came in.
27th or something,
So
April 27th or.
25th, I thought it was, but somewhere 25th, 26th, 27th. So that's where those two letters are. So Dave, I do have a question about, I heard you say initially you thought, and you went back and forth. Initially, you thought it was unlisted. In your mind, it was clearly unlisted. And then you said, well, why don't we do it unlisted? But conduct ourselves like a type 1. But tonight, you just went back and said, I think it's just clearly an unlisted.
I made that decision like about 2 weeks ago, yeah.
Okay, so my concern would be not to knock the judiciary, but most judges that look at these things, if it does go to court, many of them don't know squat about seeker. And so they do go to other items that are maybe the shiny object, whatever.
It's a risk.
Why would we not do a type 1?
Couple of
You don't
reasons.
you don't get dinged, I assume, by anybody for over typing it, question mark.
Well, there's a couple of things, and again, we'll throw this before the board. Number one, it may not do all that much good before the judge. I've actually had a case, which I don't want to spend too much time on, where it wasn't a cell tower case, it was actually a wetlands law case where they raised another one of these sort of iffy type 1 categories, and we did exactly that. And it ultimately didn't, the judges are going to do what they want to do, and it's usually not the most important factor anyway. Secondly, although we pretty much we're going through the type 1 procedures anyway, pretty much. We did a long form, we've done a coordinated review. A third procedure is not all that difficult, but there are a couple of things to consider. One of the things you cannot do with the type 1 action that you can do with an unlisted action is a condition negative declaration. I don't know if we'd ever get to that point. Most boards very rarely do it. We very rarely do it, but it might be something we want to keep in our pocket. And so that's something for the board to decide. We will preclude that possibility. And the third thing, and this is really what the citizens are driving at. They know that we're doing a fairly extensive review here, but a type 1 action carries with it under the regulations, a presumption that it's going to require an environmental impact statement. And I think Berg cited that in his letter. I'm sure Scott is aware of that. And so it really does become a judgment call as to whether you want to be quote unquote safe by bringing yourself up to type 1 and thereby engendering that presumption. And so that's another thing to throw on the table, both the fact that we preclude a condition negative declaration, we'd be essentially creating a presumption here, which may not be perfectly legitimate. And again, it's our job to make the best, as the Chief Justice said, call balls and strikes. If there is a sense of risk here, that's more for them than for us. So those are the three reasons why having, and it may not, and ultimately may not help that much in litigation if the judge doesn't like what we did on all the other issues. And so all those things to me came together to say, my preference would be to do unlisted, but I wanted to hear what they thought about the risk in this situation.
So is this a good point? Does the board want to make any comments right now or ask any questions of our
I just
attorney?
want to say, I think it's really challenging to start to think about, what a future judgment or a judge might do, whether they'll. And I think it just muddies the waters in terms of our decision.
Right, he may be thinking about it, but
Yeah.
It's not for us.
For us, it's to determine on the facts, what the significance is, and to let the rest of it fall where it may, and make our best informed, intelligent decision that we can in order to do that. Everything else.
you know what, I want to make sure that the board has the exact language, because it is going to come down to this. Before we ask Scott, I'm going to read it to you. So it's a 617.4 or something. You got it? Oh, I had it, where is it?
Right in the middle of the page, more or less. See.
Okay, this is number 7 in the type 1 list. Any structure exceeding 100 feet above original ground level in a locality without any zoning regulation pertaining to height. So that is the actual black letter language of the secret regulation. Thank you. Any structure exceeding 100 feet above original ground level in a locality without any zoning regulation pertaining to height. Again, it's number 7 if you pull the type 1 list.
Could I
Let's
just
hear
share-
from other members of the board.
I just wanted to share that I've been an applicant on numerous projects that were unlisted and had environmental impact statements. So it
Yeah.
doesn't preclude that.
And vice versa, we've had type one actions.
You can
that
make
were
that type one
decked.
action, absolutely. The most critical thing.
Yes, yes.
The most critical thing in the board's review is going to be the declaration of significance. Typing is not typically, we're gonna go through the same analysis, whether we have type one or unlisted. The forms can be different, although we're using the type one forms here anyway. So that's right.
Sorry,
Yeah, a couple of questions. So unlisted, declaring unlisted doesn't prevent us from using long-term, yeah.
No, does not prevent it. Happens all the time.
Second, would you remind us what the waiver gonna be about?
What the what?
Waiver? could be-
Oh, the waiver, they've asked, instead of going to the ZBA for variance from the provision limiting it to tree height plus 50 feet, they've come to us for a waiver. And one of the things we need to do, you got the actual provision there? You just scroll. You want to read the waiver provision?
Is that in
He's
our
looking
code?
for it.
In our code?
In our court?
In our
code.
code.
Yeah, it's purely a function of the town code.
Okay.
so sorry, the reason we did that. It's a big project. To have the ZBA also involved in coordinating with them.
Too long.
I was happy when the applicant said, we'd like to come to this board, and I
Okay,
said,
I
fine.
understand.
But write us a letter, and we actually accepted, I believe, a long time ago that we would do the waiver, but we're not there yet, but David,
Because the tower more than 50 feet.
yeah, we have to give the waiver for the extra 45, 50
Okay,
feet,
I got it. I
yes.
just trying to refresh my memory.
And then what we're gonna do, I've asked Dave to come up with the criteria for that. We're probably gonna use the same criteria that's used by the ZBA in doing a use variance.
No,
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 what kind of variance?
area variance.
Area.
It's
variance.
a distance. So if.
So we're gonna use their criteria anyway, but we're gonna do
Well,
it.
I'm gonna start with that as a base and it's also gonna be, for the benefit of the public and things like that. So we'll work off of that, but we're gonna start with that and figure something out that's fair.
Okay, you're all right?
Yeah. so-
Anybody else? To ask our attorney, and then we're gonna go to Scott.
I just did some research about this topic as well, and it seems to be that in New York State, 99% of all cell phone towers are unlisted action.
Or what?
99% of all cell phone towers which are being built are as unlisted action.
Because they're gonna be in towns that are gonna have a zoning law that pertains to height.
Okay, so 99.9% are.
99%. That's what Google said.
There's some rural jurisdictions in New York that don't have zoning,
Right,
but they do site plan review.
But that's why if they don't, DEC is making this type one, so that it gets a really good look.
Okay, let's hear anybody else from the board. Scott?
Yes, thank you. So you have my letter, obviously. And I went back, as you suggested, Mr. Chairman, to look at what the discussion was on, April 15th, April 14th. And I agree with the discussion with Mr. Gordon and the conversation that was had. I think it was leaning towards an unlisted action for various reasons that you kind of recapitulated here. I disagree completely with Mr. Berg's letter, because I think, well, number one, he agrees that if you read the law strictly, it has to be type one. But then he goes on to make other arguments, one of which is, well, the requirement in the seeker regs is just unreasonable. And he's entitled to that opinion, but it's valid law. He can't just, with the stroke of a pen on his part, remove that provision that was validly, lawfully
You
promulgated.
mean the
by
requirement
DEC.
that it's in a town without zoning?
Correct. So just like you said, Mr. Gordon, earlier, he's trying to say, just ignore that. And I understand why he's doing that. He thinks he's in a better position if this board were to type it as a type one. For a bunch of reasons, if there's going to be litigation, and if this board, I'm not saying you're going to, if you were to approve this and he was to sue, or his clients were to sue, he wants this board to have a type one action, but then he's gonna say, well, it's a presumption of significant adverse impact. They didn't do the EIS. He's gonna make that argument to the court. None of which I think will prevail, but, and that goes to the risk that you mentioned. My client is very risk averse. I tend to be risk averse when, considering strategies. I don't see this as a risk at all, because I don't know you very well, but from coming here for the 5 months, I'm pretty sure that you're going to take a hard look at this action. And if you read the case law, even if there is a typing mistake, the courts will always go to, well, what was the review done? And if the review was a hard look and proper, 99.9% of the time, they're never gonna overturn it because it was unlisted, but you did type 1 or vice versa. I just don't see it. So I think you have to, and anecdotally, I think put this in my letter, I mean, and to your point, I mean, I tried to count one time, I don't know, I mean, it's over 500 applications in the last 26 or so years. I have never had one community issue a type 1 classification for this specific reason. Just never has happened. Now, I've always been in communities where they have zoning that regulates height.
Has this discussion ever come up before, this question, based on, let's say, a citizen concern?
It came up once recently. And the whole case was litigated, but this issue never got into court because it got shut down right away. It was in the town, village of Highland Falls. It was with a pro se challenger who really was out there on a lot of these issues, and she raised that issue, but
And that's a village with very important scenic impacts, it's right.
West Point,
Yep.
Hudson River.
Yep.
So that came up as well as some other type 1 issues, but and the court said it was not type 1 for the other issues, but this specific 617.4B7 was not litigated. So no, this has never come up.
So I just want to the point of Scott believes that we're going to be doing a very rigorous, and we've just started study of what it is that the impacts of the tower. And in fact, today, what I did, not to prove that point, because we certainly will, but today at 1:50, I sent him a long letter with steps that we expect to happen over the next month, steps 1 through 9. Just not to prove that we're going to do a good job, but just to give them the specifics of it. You may not have gotten a chance to look at it, but for example, the RF study, which we've had, we need an answer to some of the things that the RF expert brought up that haven't been answered yet. To the EAF has been a bit of a faux pas in that there's at least 3 versions of the EAF up there, because in redoing the EAF, it's not, there were mistakes made, they were fixed, there were other mistakes discovered. In any case, our planner sent a very long letter to Scott, I provided it to Scott, saying you have to redo the whole EAF and give us a supplemental EAF. Not start from scratch, but you got to fix all these problems, because clearly there's some holes in the document. And I think you appreciate the letter that we sent you, and we'll talk about when we're going to get the information.
It's being worked on, but yes.
But to continue along with the kinds of stuff I'm asking them, and we obviously did the balloon test. Well, within the context of doing a visual assessment, there's a DEC document that's out there again on the Google Drive. It's called Assessing and Mitigating Visual and Aesthetic Impacts, and I list the 5 steps that they have to take. And there's 5 short steps, but there's about, under each one, there's 5 to 10 different categories where they have to answer the visual impact, and they have to come up with, if there is, they have to come up with mitigation of one sort or another, whether it's a Frankenpole or whatever, the coloration, dealing with the antennae. So I told them we're going to be looking for that. We need to clarify the procedures or the criteria that we're going to use to come up with the waiver, if we do grant the waiver. So we need to have those, and we're going to be looking for those from our planner and from our attorney. We're looking for Mr. Berg's first letter, which dealt primarily with environmental issues. I've asked Scott to get himself an environmentalist that deals with migratory bird patterns, deals with impact of this tower on the flora and the fauna specifically, and a few other items that were raised in the letter from Mr. Berg, the first letter. And then we're in turn going to have that reviewed by our expert to make sure that we agree with whatever Scott comes up with. That is sort of a nonsense, that's not a proposal, that has to be done because there's significant assumed significant environmental issues raised by Berg. Whether we agree or not is what I want the applicant to give us a letter and or study, and then we're gonna look at that study also and determine to our satisfaction, yes or no. It's vital to this whole issue of the environmental impact. And there's a number of other things that I've asked them to do, and that's not even talking about the site plan. Some of you are aware of the fact that I've been going back and forth with Dan Weinheimer on the site plan in terms of the pad that's gonna be put up, the co-locators that are gonna be there, the presence of generators or not, how many generators, and what's the noise impact of those generators in a fashion that needs to subscribe to our noise ordinance, namely a study by a noise person, so on and so forth. So it's not to impress, it's not for me to tout what we're asking for, simply to say to the board, we're going to be asking very diligently for a lot of material to let Scott know that and to let the public know that this is not a fait accompli one way or the other. We have a lot of work to do in the next month and a half, 2 months. So anyway, so you have a question or
Yeah,
comment?
you mentioned site plan, there's some, on a note, the site plan missing showing a fuel tank for generator.
That's all part of it.
Right, right. but
Dan
it's-
Weinheimer has to come in with. So obviously a diesel generator is gonna make more noise than a propane generator. So if he exceeds the noise permitted by our code, he's gotta find a way to mitigate it.
I'm talking about a fuel tank.
Yes,
The fuel tank is, for a diesel generator, is actually a belly tank under the generator, so it's built
It's a one
into
package.
that. Yeah, if you opened up the side casing,
Okay.
that
How many
tank-
gallons?
225, give or take.
so see, he's got a questions when Dan Weinheimer comes in with the site plan material, we'll be asking and grilling him and making adjustments as needed. So anyway, just so everybody realizes that we still have a lot of work to do. Jennifer?
So I'd like to, this is kind of a bigger picture comment. Given the level of interest with this project and the amount of comments we've received thus far, I wonder if it might be useful to begin pulling together, and maybe we were gonna do this anyway, but pull together a lot of this information like noise or, visual impact in one location so that as we review these things, we can review something and comment on it versus having pieces come in. That might be helpful, consider it like a
Ultimately,
chapter.
it will be in a part 3.
Are you talking about in our file,
I'm talking.
in our
well, there's also
correspondence
going to be-
file for comments?
There'll also be a public hearing on this, and it would be
Right.
helpful to have a document and this information available for the public to review. So I'm thinking about, I don't know exactly what it would necessarily look like, but to have something submitted.
I could suggest a draft part 3, which the applicant, we actually prepared the final part 3. for
Right.
The applicant and us, and all, that would be essentially a list of the environmental, the prospective environmental impacts that we could certainly. post for the public.
That makes great sense. I have
It does.
all the items, Scott, that I sent you in that memo from early this morning. If it was in a draft part 3. That would help the board for sure. Now it could come in pieces and then we say, okay,
Yeah.
are we done? Yes or no? And then we have something that we can review.
Yes,
Um,
and that could include the
and that-
migratory birds. It
That's
could-
available to the
Absolutely.
public.
All good things.
Everything could go in there.
And then ultimately that sets up your declaration of significance.
Exactly, so we would have that, it
Whichever way
would
it
be
goes.
available to
Yeah,
the
we
public.
can do that.
And then if we could add to that, if I feel like for this project, it might also be useful to begin summarizing the comments that we receive in one location, because right now they're all in different letters. I think that on this project especially, it'll be important that we respond to all of the comments we receive. And by tracking them now, we can make sure that it's either addressed in the original.
That's a
Environmental
procedure that occurs in 2 areas of environmental and regulatory law. One is like if an agency does a New York State, a state agency does a regulation, they typically do something called responsiveness summary, which you're probably aware of at DEP. And the second is if you do an EIS, there are comments on the DEIS that need to be responded to, which actually creates the FEIS.
Yes.
So those are, but we don't typically do that for a declaration of significance, but there is, if it ultimately ends up in a neg deck, but there's no reason why you couldn't do it.
So I
Yes,
asked Scott, at least a week and a half or 2 weeks ago, that on the Berg letters, I wanted an answer to each of the Berg letters. He asked if he could wait until after the public hearing to answer not only the Berg in detail, Now, he'll probably get to it a lot, much before then, but each of the letters that we've received, as well as the comments, I think you agreed that you would give a response to each one of those.
So we're happy to respond to the Berg letters, and one of which I want to just, since it was raised tonight, in terms of the migratory bird issue, since you may have seen his letter, we will address that. It's, I know it's easy coming from the applicant to say, but it's not an issue, and here's why it's not going to be an issue. As part of our NEPA due diligence, which I think I mentioned to the board before, we have regulatory obligations, and one of those is we have a consultant who's writing up a summary of migratory bird issues, endangered species, federally and statewide, and those will be sent to the U.S. Wildlife, U.S. Fish and Wildlife. And I've already spoken to the consultant, and yes, we know we have some potential endangered species habitat in the area. Those never stop a project because there are always ways just to work around them. So if you have a bald eagle in the area, obviously we can't disturb it, nor would we disturb an existing bald eagle nest or anything. If it's just habitat, we will generally be told you cannot build or take trees down, between April 1st and Halloween, I believe it is. So then the rest of the year you can, and that's generally how it's going to work. We anticipate we will have a letter from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife explaining that, yes, there are these potential issues out there, but a taking will not occur and the project can proceed based on these conditions. But we will have that information as part of a.
Scott, are we restricted under seeker to only endangered species that you'd be looking at under NEPA? Are there migratory birds like ospreys and things like that that may be of concern to us that might not be endangered species that you need to do under NEPA?
So I think that's a good question. I'm not 100% sure, but on the osprey, I do know that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, because although I've never heard of an issue with an osprey nesting on our tower where it involves or restricts our use. Listen, I've seen hawks nest on big towers here and there, so I'm sure it happens.
Falcons nest on all kinds of things.
But U.S. Fish and Wildlife has regulations how to deal with it. So you just have to make sure that you don't take the animal if you have to deal with it. You do it under their regulations, and it's perfectly legal, lawful, and legitimate.
We'll have our folks review what you would.
I have a
Yes.
question
Go ahead.
as far as, so you were discussing U.S. Fish and Wildlife, but I think we also need to get sign off from New York State DEC.
Right.
It'll be part of it. That's, again,
Because one's the feds, one's the state.
Of course.
And the lists are a little different.
so I think the timber rattlesnake is
That's in there.
it state?
That's, I can't, it is state.
It is-
It's definitely state.
State, notwithstanding my lack of desire for snakes, but.
No, they're very.
They very kill you. Anyway, no, I'm kidding. But so if we run into situations where there's habitat for that, and
Yes.
we do things like, we have education for our consultants. If you see this snake, you have to call this person, state DEC, they come out there. We do things for turtles, believe it or not, we create paths for them. It's like an endangered turtle. And we
So,
just did-
so let me just query you about something. The physical impact on the landscape, aside from the visual, right?
Yeah.
Put that aside, but the physical impact on the landscape equates to the road you're putting in and the 50 by 50 pad, question mark, right?
Yeah, generally, I mean, I have to look to the plan, but that's the most, right? Yes.
Okay, and the migratory birds would be a flyover in that path of that tower, right?
Correct, yes.
All right, I just,
But that's.
We're making it
I'm just
sound
telling
like
you what
we're
we're
putting
doing.
up-
We're-
we're putting up a 50,000 square foot Tesla factory, which you wouldn't get approval for that anyway, but in that.
No, believe me,
But
I'm
it's
always
50
arguing,
It's 50 by 50,
this
correct?
is,
Right.
this is so limited in terms of in terms of disturbance. Obviously, there are issues that you have to look at and they will be
If
looked
you
at.
recall, one of Berg's arguments is that he had a picture of what was it, falcons or ospreys on a tower in Mamaroneck, and so he says if some bird puts a nest in a tower, they're gonna be getting the RF radiation at a much more high level than people are gonna get, and therefore that was his argument at that point for it,
Yeah.
Your people.
Why?
I don't think we have
can't-
OSHA regulations.
I would assume that
protect
since we
against
can't
that.
consider RF, the effect of RF in humans, we also can't consider. the-
Well, his point was humans never get within, humans never get within 20 feet of the transmitter because we're kind of, well, first of all, we're on the ground, second of all, we're at a distance, but the birds are gonna get right next to the transmitter. And so they're gonna get the much more intensive RF radiation. So that is his argument. Obviously, we're not competent to evaluate that, but we will get people who can, Scott will do as well, and we'll, that has to be crunched. I mean, that is-
Wait a minute, there's structures that you can put on buildings to dissuade animals from perching.
Yeah.
I've been involved in projects like that.
Yeah.
So if it does show that there is, anyway.
Okay.
There's-
Yeah, you're still, you're.
Well, we're
Getting distracted.
Type 1 are unlisted.
Dave Church, you have a
Thank you.
question?
I'm just gonna say, you get way ahead of yourselves.
Yeah.
My memo, based on some public comments. Better or worse, I'm recommending you need a fourth revision of the EAF.
Correct.
Admittedly, one of the revisions was one word change, so it's this whole question of migratory birds is legitimate. It's. Their flyways known in the Rondau Valley and the Wallkill Valley. It's prominent.
We'll get to it
local
on
feature.
declaration of
We need,
significance.
we need disclosure on the EAF, Scott, on the questions that I recommend. Some of these questions on the, just an updated EAF. And then we'll see where we're at.
Yeah.
We talked
I
about,
mean, there's no question if you just look at if you look at the impact analysis on migratory birds, it's the light on a tower that's of greatest concern, and there's no light proposed.
There's no like.
So I mean, that's at least what the scholastic publications are noting.
Correct.
But we're not there yet.
okay, so we're not
We
there yet, we're
need to-
talking
we
about,
need disclosure on these
Yeah,
issues.
and we have and I passed that along a little while ago. I followed up and they say they're working on your memo and the
okay.
requested changes.
Does the board feel like they have enough information to make a decision as to whether or not it's a type 1 or an unlisted?
I just have one more comment. I know that we're lead agency. Do we have a list of the other involved agencies that
Yes.
we're tracking all that?
It's on the EAF.
So okay,
Actually, technically, we're the only involved agency. The other three that were potentially involved is the ZBA that will not be involved because they're not applying to the ZBA. And the other two that were identified were the county planning department of 239M, but they're not technically an involved agency because they're not issuing an approval. And I think it was county health.
but if
The
we.
building department, I think,
Wouldn't
too.
We
Fish
put-
and
we put
Wildlife
public-
and
with
DEC also be?
state
because
policy.
we're consulting
So,
with
look,
them?
Technically under seeker.
Dave, wait a minute. I think the question is different. When I sent out the letter for lead agency status, it went out, I don't have it handy, but it went out to about 12
We
different
have a list
agencies.
of- okay.
I have a list of who got it. Nobody responded, so we're the lead
Okay.
agency. I think that was,
Don't show your
Coordinated for lead agency.
that was the question. Did we let everybody know? Yes, we sent it
It went
to,
to state parks, it
Hang
went to
Yeah,
Minnewaska,
we
it
sent it
went
to,
it went to Palisades.
We sent it to everybody
Preservation,
but
it went
to
to
the-
DOT. it went-
but to the State House and the White House.
Hope not.
Okay, so everybody believes they have enough information to vote on it. All right. So
Make a motion.
I'll entertain a motion. Oh, I'll make the motion. I'll make a motion that we type this as an unlisted action under seeker.
I second.
Second, so Jones made the motion. The second was made by Hans Fretcherin. Any other discussion on the point, on the question? Anybody in favor? Oh, those in favor, sorry. Signify by aye.
Sorry.
Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? And we don't have to do, since it's a secret determined, we don't have to do a voice vote. We just did a voice vote, but
You're fine.
so 7 to 0. Nobody abstained. Okay. So we're not going to talk about Horizon matters any further tonight. I would like to hear from you, Scott, in writing. I know you sent a thank you for sending it because I sent you a lot of work that needs to be done. I'd like to know what else you need, why I'm asking for it, and when you expect to get it. So the next time we want to see you is the 28th to begin to talk about some of the information that I asked for.
And that's the plan, is to get that information to this board in sufficient time so you can review it before the 28th meeting. Along with site plan information.
And I like the idea of the draft part 3.
I'll work on that.
And if the draft part 3 is updated along the way, it just means that, okay?
It's like a roadmap.
But
a whole
the next meeting will
checklist.
be, May 28th. On,
I also would recommend that we use Unicolab for distributing the materials and collecting the materials. If
No.
you see when we're ready.
No.
We're not ready.
Not gonna do that. Because we have too much on the Google Drive. Unicolab, as you all know, is a new system. I'm not gonna use this project as a guinea pig for a new system.
That makes,
Peter,
Did we decide, are we doing a version 4 of the EAF?
Dave asked for an updated.
Dave asked for an update
Okay, so
and we are doing it. Yes,
Very
we're
good.
making changes. They're looking at it to make sure the changes are appropriate and other information has. been
and just for everybody, including the applicant and particularly the public, we're gonna try our best to make this information available. I'm not sure it's the website, the town website at this point is the vehicle for doing that. So it may be a more easily accessible foilable file that contains everything. So we do it the old fashioned way, but it's all aggregated. And so it's just a matter of, I don't know if we can bend the foil rules, but it's just a matter of going into the town clerk, filling out the form. They send it to me or to Robin, and we have it all there. We don't have to take time gathering it. We just shoot it out by whatever vehicle, but I'm equally as frustrated as not being able to
It's,
get information out to the public in a convenient way. The new system, will be available to the public to view all the time,
I understand your
And-
point.
but to play around with the new system,
Is that already running?
sorry,
Is that already running?
no.
it's
No.
gross. I have,
For one who has seen systems conversions where huge banks have been smashed together, they've literally been smashed together and collapsed of their own weight because a system hasn't been adequately tested.
Still in beta.
So
So validation.
something like that.
just the last note is it would be really helpful to have a really thorough, detailed project narrative. Explaining everything that's gonna happen, what it's gonna be like at the end, because that helps frame the analysis. So when people read about what happens with migratory birds, it's helpful to have a good narrative.
I think that will be part of the draft part 3, where we'll provide the narrative, what the project is, what's been done. Then we'll go through each and every
Yes.
important environmental factor.
with findings.
Yeah, and provide the information, provide the issues and provide, yes, exactly. So then it's like a checklist too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Very productive. Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, so the next item, we're gonna do one more item on the agenda. Bill Eggers has arrived for Firestone. We'll do that and then we'll take a break. And then our next item on the agenda, so people will know, is Ridgeview, followed by Meta. And then the last item on the agenda is Pine Grove. So just so people know, timing wise, what's coming up. So board, Firestone is in your pile, probably about 4 projects down. And we got a glimpse at this project. Is Firestone in that pile? Yeah, Robin? Everybody up there. So we got a glimpse of this project last time, weeks ago. And Dave Church did a write-up. So Dave, I'm gonna ask you to go through your write-up of Firestone for the board. And I think as a result of that, we're gonna have lots of other questions and lots of work for Bill Eggers to do. Bill, why don't you just give the board a summary of what the project is, rather than me fan it out.
Yeah, this is on Stony Hill Road, that way here. And this is a sort of a combination of a 3-lot subdivision, creating 3 lots, 4 to 4.5 acres, approximately, all with about same amount of frontage on Stony Hill Road. 3 building lots, and then there would be reviewing lands that lie behind those lots, 29 acres that crosses over and up to the cliff beyond the Stony Hill, which is proposed to be attached to other lands of the applicant and owner. So we've got a kind of a combination, 3-lot subdivision and a lot line improvement to take this vacant land and attach it to its other lands. We're creating a total lot there of 82 acres. 3, 4+ acre lots and the remaining lands of a total of 82 acres.
Okay, so with that, Dave, would you go through your letter? It's in the Google file under Firestone and specifically under draft review or review letter. There's a letter there from Dave Church. So Dave, you want to go through it?
Yeah, so hitting the highlights, so this is creating 4 parcels out of 2 parcels, as Bill described. It's in the Hamlet zoning district. It's on the fringe of it. It's not then down. It's not in any overlay district. So none of those regulations are impact this. Bill for his client has submitted everything required for the board to proceed. As required to sketch plan submissions. So the next step would be for him to, when you're ready, is get a final subdivision plan in front of you in terms of documentation. Let's see here. Get into environmental issues. He submitted a short environmental assessment form with a mapper. It highlighted a potential for proximity to a regulated water body. I checked all the sources that are readily available. There's no hydric soils, there's no these advisory wetland maps, they're only advisory now of various sources. There's nothing indicated. I'm guessing that this proximity is related to Stony Hill, which is in the rear of the property. As proposed, Bill, nothing's going to be anywhere near it, right? In terms of construction, well away from it, acres away from it, right? However, we've got a couple things. Related to the new code, there is mapped prime farmland and farmland of statewide importance, which is those resource values that if you have 3 acres, your new code requires a conservation subdivision design. So the board will have to consider, well, one option is Bill can come back and say there's not 3 acres. Because I only did an estimate. However, I'm pretty confident there's probably 3 acres. Then the question becomes, this is a new provision. You've waived it once before, the requirement. I don't know what kind of precedent you want to set about requiring a conservation subdivision. Again, conservation subdivisions, sometimes called clustering, only mean that if you use that option, you can relax certain dimensional requirements of the subdivision regulations. You can relax setback requirements, lot size, requirements for the driveway, things like that. It doesn't have to be you cram all the houses over in one corner. It just means to make it fit in the property better. You can relax dimensional requirements. So you just have to make a decision at some point whether you want to see that happen, discuss what it might do or not do, or suggest the applicant request a waiver, which the applicant's authorized to do whether you won't ask for it or not. Ultimately, any waiver has to come in writing from the applicant. There are 2 resource values that did pop up that I'm recommending the applicant contact the New York Natural Heritage Program. There's both rare plant and a natural communities reference. I sent everyone the maps. I have screenshots of the maps. Did you get those? They're highlighted. They're right where, they're right on top of where the houses and the driveways are proposed. I just think due diligence would require, you need to get a professional input on this. I suppose arguably an option could be the applicant could proceed to go hire a professional ecologist and submit a memo. The simpler first step might be very reliable professional staff is to contact the New York Natural Heritage Program, essentially a division of DEC. And they're usually pretty prompt and proper about responding with any comments and any recommendations. So that's essentially the 2 items.
So Dave, let me just jump in and run along a few of the things that I noticed and things that we need on the map, if that's okay.
Sure.
All right, so just like we have at the Nolan project, if you remember Nolan Palmer, where there was prime farmlands on the property, and there's certainly 3 acres. So it's sort of linked this whole notion of prime farmlands and how much is on an individual lot versus how much on the entire plat. So Bill, just like we did with Nolan, you need to show us where the prime soil farmlands are.
The prime farmlands is, I believe, I didn't bring my copy, I had it on there, is entirely within the vacant parcel that's being processed through the lot line improvement.
Okay, so it's in the back
to the other
parcel.
parcel, so it's not on the building parcels at all.
Okay, so we just need to see proof of that
Yeah,
on the map. So we need to see that. You need to put on the map where these natural resource areas are that contain rare or endangered plants or communities. That needs to be on the map also. So, and as Dave said, you do need to get an ecologist to do an analysis of that and or just tell us for the following reasons you don't think you need to do that.
just for my information, I've been doing this for many years, and this is the first time I've heard of this. Is this something new?
Dave?
I've
Oh,
had-
yeah, I mean,
I've
I've only been advising the board for a year, so I haven't done it a long time.
Well, if you want to know if we've ever done it before, the projects, yeah. We had a project, DeJager, we did it for another one. Project hasn't moved forward because of the nature of the natural habitat there. And there was also one, I think it was cool, and I don't think you did it, I think Barry
No.
did it. Malatesta was the name of it, was the owner of the property, and there was Timber Rattler dens there, and he had to do a whole study and had to avoid the area, outline the area and avoid it. So we have done it in the past. I
Okay.
can't,
Yeah, I don't even know what to do, you know, like,
But
who
you
do I
can,
contact?
you know,
Where do you get
if
this
you-
information even?
I'll shoot you the contact. for
Okay.
the Heritage Program, they get these inquiries all the time. I will note, those lines on the map, those areas on the map are advisory, they're not you're in or you're out lines. So I'm hesitant to say, put them on a map. Because part of the reason why they're
well, why don't we do
Part
this?
of the reason why they're vague is because it's the core knowledge of where these species are is not something that you want in the public domain. Believe it or not, people go steal these things.
Okay, so why don't we do this?
And like the historic preservation.
Dave is gonna give you the name of just to move this along, Dave's gonna
Yeah.
give you the contact
Okay.
information. You need to come back to us and tell us, show us a letter from them or commentary from them. No problem, or there is a problem, then we need to deal with
Yeah.
it. So you gotta do the prime soils, it's gotta be on the map. You gotta do this notion of the natural resources. I want the upfront area to be heat mapped, right? We talked about
Yeah,
that
yeah, I've
last
got
time.
that.
You
Yeah,
need to
it's
get the
not-
heat map.
Yeah, it's-
Because if nothing else, you got 3 driveways coming off of Stonyfield. One of them is going way up in the back, over some what looks like pretty steep land and back into some pretty steep land. So if nothing else, there may be an opportunity to aggregate these houses and only have one shared driveway. We can see that better if we had a heat map. You could see it better.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm concerned about that, soils marked, and then minor, but highway superintendent will comment on it. And that's all I had. Does anybody have anything else they want on?
Is there a difference? It's a question, is there a difference whether the prime farmland is forest or not?
Under our code, no. And if there's enough people on this board that wants to send a note off to the town board to say, hey, guys, let's look at this. Because you could argue, well, if it's not prime farmland, it's prime forest,
That's
question mark, or it isn't. But for now, that's the way the code reads. Good question.
I believe part of it is in the core forest.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
was gonna say.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's in the core forest.
Core forest in the same.
So you hit all the,
Yeah.
you hit all the bells.
There's
The back
also-
end of lot 3, about where the septic area is on lot 3 is core forest.
Also in the EAF, it said that the project portion is located adjacent to for SHPO archaeological sites, and yes is clicked.
I did not catch that, Dave. It needs SHPO review because of archaeological.
Well,
sites.
you can't. There was a study done nearby. I went to the CRISP program. I think it's the database online that
Yeah.
the SHPO has. A study's been done in proximity to there. It can't hurt. If
So,
the board
Bill,
wants a
you-
memo from SHPO,
We needed a
my
memo.
guess is they're gonna say, of note.
Yeah, I
There's
think
no-
Need a
we
memo
already
from SHPO.
That's submitted to,
Okay,
it's in the
Okay.
works.
okay.
You've had great success with SHPO, and if not, you have a congressman you could.
Yeah,
talk to.
right.
Zorian?
Bill, for the clarity of the map, so that code enforcement letter talks about 4 lots. Right, because one of them will be taking part of that.
The
cut off.
fourth lot is the lot that's being combined with the.
Right.
Right.
Shouldn't be shown on location map in solid lines, so it's clear that all that area is involved.
I see what you're saying.
I'm not
So-
sure
Yeah,
that I know what you're saying.
If you look at the
Location
location,
map, if you look at side, is only showing current
Oh, I see what you're saying.
outline rather than
what's proposed.
what's proposed.
So you're talking about the inset map.
correct.
Inset
Yes,
and
location.
maybe on the plan also, I know you cannot include those at the big lot, but at least show solid lines rather than.
Okay.
Because-
And Bill, remember, you mentioned it, but remember, this is also a lot line, so the board has to approve that we're gonna erase the line and combine it with the
Yes,
large.
all right.
That'd be part of the decision also. Jennifer?
In addition to what's already been said, for the next submission, could you also define the contours? Because I don't see it on here, or maybe I'm missing it, but I don't know.
They're not
the-
labeled.
They're not, right? So I don't know what these.
There's contours, but there's no. there's no-
Yeah,
Yeah.
1 foot, 10 feet. no.
they're 2 foot.
Good
Okay.
point.
Well, then you.
Anybody have anything else?
Yeah, but at this stage, Bill submitted a sketch, what meets the sketch requirements. The final subdivision has requirements, have a whole list of things, many of which you just mentioned.
So Bill, again, if I look at the way it's drawn, it's lovely, but I think when you look at the slopes, you're gonna wind up aggregating these homes with potentially a single driveway.
That's an interesting concept. Thought about that, but,
Thank you.
yeah, there's. When we did, because I did do the heat map, I just didn't get it printed out yet. It's not as much as I thought it would be.
Yeah, and the only reason for that, it could avoid a lot of haggling about. This board is probably gonna be a little bit more receptive to what we do in terms of prime farmland and slopes. If you're trying to eliminate the destructive action of 3 driveways.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know, what does the board think?
Just thinking Driveway also, trying to combine.
I mean, if it's possible,
Yeah.
and there are flat lands here where you could. That you'd have to change the lot boundaries, but. And we can be flexible, and if you even wanted to go further and declare a conservation subdivision. That's we're on steroids now.
Within those 3 lots.
Well, no, including the one in the back. You know, think about it differently. They're attaching it to the larger lot, Zorian.
Mhm.
What if they were to take some of it and make it all a conservation subdivision? I don't know, but there's some thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we'll see
Every board
again.
is different. I was at a board last week and we were trying to have a shared driveway and they're like, we don't like that. We don't like shared driveways. Like. So,
Well, you know, there's problems with it clearly, but you got
Yeah.
3 driveways crashing through some core forests. And other wonderful things. So, anyway, so Bill, maybe you'll be on the 28th. I don't know. It depends on when you get me all this information.
that's.
And you've got 2 weeks, so you have to get me everything in 2 weeks or else it'll have to
Yeah,
slip too.
most of that mapping, corridors, the heat maps and everything, most of that is already done.
Okay,
Yeah.
so the issue is really how you intend to handle this issue of. How the heat map comes out and how
Yeah.
you intend to deal with it. So either the 28th or June 9th. Okay, would have anything else? Thanks, Bill.
Site visit?
We could do a site visit if you want. Would the end of May be all right? Robin, mark down and we'll do a site visit. I'll tell you all about that. Work with Bill to get a site visit going. Thank you. Okay,
Thank you.
so next on the agenda,
Thanks, Bill.
we said we would have a quick break. So let's have a 5 to 10 minute.
So we're gonna Jennifer,
stop
this then?
Yeah.
You think of this?
So we'll give it 10 minutes.
Oh, hey. Yeah. Another push, another moment.
I'm looking at, you don't have chocolate, do you?
Flags not staying on.
So it's like.
My guess is.
Yeah, I'm watching and no one's touching it and.
So I don't know.
Trust me.
Do the best you can. If you can't get it, we can't get it.
Migratory birds that are endangered become an issue, so the answer is I don't care, just give it to Bruce.
We should, just remind everybody,
The other thing we need.
everybody might still be on.
It was a short term.
So it's live again.
Yeah, really.
I don't know why.
It was,
Short, you want.
it was a Rick ten.
No.
Magic.
Good job.
Daylight saving time, 10 minutes.
Okay, let me get my ridge view. All right, Jeff. Good evening.
Which one is this?
Where's your applicant? I miss him.
Is this review or?
Twice cancel, we stayed home. So he listened to you for a change, right? So everybody knows Jeff, and we've all gone through the vicissitudes of this project.
It's a review.
And I don't want to make light about it.
Correct.
I did bring several copies of the safety plan and the amended EAF and another letter confirming no wetlands on the property.
All right, so I'm gonna take it.
This is
I
the
think that,
wetlands.
right, the board has this letter, and they have that as well. You can give it out.
That's the newest version of the letter?
All right, why don't you give this out to each member of the board?
Okay,
Don't mind. And I'll pass. Why don't you give these out?
I don't know if I have enough for everybody on that, I'm sorry.
I don't need one. I printed it out.
Okay, this is,
Today.
well, actually split the bottom. They told them not to harass them.
Thank you.
You remember be very fond.
I know.
Wow. Thanks. Oh, this is safety plan?
All right, I'll take a deep breath as Jeff is giving this stuff out, and I have a couple of comments to make. Thank you, Jeff. Okay, so the board is well aware of the ups and downs of this project. It was on, it was off, it was on, it was off. Meaning it was retyped as a religious educational facility. Then the applicant, after our last meeting, sent me a letter saying that he was withdrawing that. And he wanted to do a drug rehabilitation center, which was back to perhaps one of its previous uses. And then I contacted his attorney and said, so over the course of 12 hours, he's back to what it was retyped as by the zoning officer, which is a religious educational facility. So having said that, Jeff, on that point, I want a letter from the applicant. I know you told me. If I was you, I would want your applicant to send a letter to the board to say, I'm in at this point with what the original use was. So, and we'll put that aside. The second request I have, Jeff, in addition to that one, is that you counsel, I think you probably did already, that you counsel, but I want to get on the record, that you counsel your client about in and out, and this board gets a little tired after a while of being in and then being out. Third thing is, I would appreciate, our secretary is there to answer questions, but not to be a consoler in chief for the applicant complaining about different things. We had a consoler in chief, his name was Joe Biden. He's not the president anymore. She's not Joe Biden, so she's not going to console your applicant when he gets upset about something. And I'll leave it at that. I do have a letter. I asked our secretary to put for the record what transpired on the call, and it's in the Google file. It was just, it was not what she's there for. All right, so let's get down to the nitty gritty. And tonight I really wanted to be, let's just get restarted again, okay? And we've had numerous discussions, so I'm gonna hear at some point from Greg. Want to hear from our planner. If there's anything else that our planner wants to add to it, and of course, we want to hear from the applicant. I'll just flag some of the comments that I have with the new stuff that I've seen. So thank you for the safety study. It's 10 times better than the previous one. And I won't say but, I'll say and he obviously got this on loan from some other project in some other town, because it refers to 13 or 14 different categories of persons, including facility director, medical director, aquatics director. And I guess I'm gonna have a little bit of fun. It's a long night. It's gonna be a long night. progressive swimming instructor, lifeguard, certified pool operator. We don't have a pool there that I know of. There might be a,
I believe there is.
is a pool. I don't know. Is there a pool on the site plan?
I haven't seen that.
All right, so,
An outside pool or in?
Outside, I think outside pool from all owners, am I correct? No?
I don't know.
I'm not aware of one. All right, so the point is,
Oh, and should we have a site visit for this as well?
yeah, but let's, absolutely, let's talk
Just
about
throwing it
that.
out there.
Yep. So Jeff, this safety plan is great, but I just questioned so.
But I'm gonna check on that, because when I reviewed it also, I said.
There's a pond.
There's a pond,
Which is besides.
and it, all right, so you just need to have
There's
him
nothing.
get rid of the things that don't apply to this project. And it looks to me like a lot of it has to, send us around the pool, and waterfront. When I saw waterfront, I guess this plan is referring to the pool. I thought maybe there was a waterfront area that I
Yeah,
missed
I
somewhere.
stand corrected. There is on
There's a
the,
pool?
on the. On the site plan, there is a pool area. marked
Okay.
on the site. Before it was not labeled.
Where is this?
It's on, the 2024-07-29 site plan map. And it's to the left of the main building.
is that the fence there? Like
Yeah, it wasn't labeled.
Square?
Oh, it's, yeah,
Square?
the map I'm looking at is not labeled.
Square and plan?
Yep, there was the fence around it.
Yeah, but
This
it wasn't
was-
labeled in the one that I saw, but on this older one it is.
What date are you now?
It's the
It's not labeled.
2024-07-29.
But
It's not labeled on
is a new
the April
building,
site plan.
covered
No, it's
with
Yeah, it's
stuff?
not labeled on the 4/8/2025. You're right. Okay. Is that a new feature?
No, he's not doing anything on it, really, yes.
So it was there. All right, so I may be wrong then, but let's just get rid of the stuff that's in the safety. plan.
I'll look at it again I did exactly what you asked the other day and called him several times because I was going through, maybe I missed a couple of things, but he specifically told me.
And he's got someone by the name of Rabbi Dopelt on here. If he's the guy
That's
that,
it, that's his guy.
okay, if he's the 24-hour contact guy, fine, but
No, that's him.
he's from Brooklyn.
Yeah.
Okay.
We come to the song.
Okay, all right, that's fine. I just wanted to be, it's great. Peter is gonna look at it. Peter, you want to comment on what you've done so far with the safety plan?
Yeah, we had a meeting set up and then we postponed it when they changed the plans on that. So I'm trying to organize another meeting for this week with the fire inspector and the district fire chief. One thing I would say, the safety plan seems much more comprehensive. I would say that because I missed this pool, I was very confused by that. So the site plan should have labels on what these buildings are. Because I just happened to click on an old map, old site plan. I didn't realize that there was a pool there, so. Then We'll go through the safety plan. Some of it it's more comprehensive, some of it is very boilerplate. But we'll come back with a recommendation on it.
And then there was one comment that we had, that I included in the post-meeting letter. I think, Dave Roberts, you had picked up on it, that the evacuation plan on at least one of the maps.
Yeah, so I'll coordinate with Peter on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we need to want, it actually let out and then back into the building. It didn't go outside, so we need to pay attention to that kind of stuff. And so there is, Jeff, there is a post-meeting letter that I sent. That went out Tuesday of last week. Yes, Tuesday of last week. And I need answers to all those things. Either you agree or you don't agree. And if you don't agree, why? So for example, we asked for a fence around the pond. That's kind of a must-have. I also want to know if there's any other areas that the applicant intends to fence. There's some view, and we'll talk about it when you come back on the 28th, but there's some concern on the part of some board members that the whole property should be fenced in. I'm not necessarily in agreement with that, but are there areas of danger that should be fenced in either by the road or whatever? We'd like to know what the applicant's views towards that are. So there was a list of 8, 9, 10 items in that post-meeting letter of last Monday or Tuesday. And we need answers on that. part of that also referred to two private houses on the property. I believe that's true. Question is, are they gonna be used or not? Do they have separate wells and septic or not? And I'm sure Greg would have caught that, but I picked up on it. Not sure if they were, I didn't even check to see if they were labeled. I just saw them as clean houses. They were sort of on the outskirts. So we just need to know about that. So all of that is in that post-meeting letter. All right, so we've got that.
That is one of my comments.
And it's in your comments too. Okay. And that's all I had. So what I'd like to do now is hear from Greg. And then I want to ask the board for general comments. And then Jeff, I'd like to hear from you as well at some point, clearly. Greg?
So I have my comment letter. I think that's going to the applicant. A lot of this,
Was it sent already?
did this go to the applicant? Or
What's
not?
the date on it?
April 18th?
Yeah. Matt, would you mind closing that door? That guy with his lights on, I can't see with his bright lights. Could you just close the door? Maybe that'll block his headlights.
Who was it mailed to?
Well, I sent it to the board. I don't know if the
Do you think
board,
it was sent to me?
I believe I did, Jeff. It was the 18th or 19th that I would have sent it. Hang on 1 second, Greg. Thank you, man. Why don't you just give my copy right now? And Greg, would you make a note to send them the, I know it's in the Google file, we can send them a PDF of it
okay.
as well. If anybody's in the Google Drive right now,
It's in there.
It's
It's in there. I'm
usually when I put it in there or have it put in there, I send it to the applicant too. Maybe I didn't. Go ahead, Greg.
So, I had several comments, but I, for some reason, well, you've gotten back to me that I think there was a subsequent submission of the site plan after my comments, and I don't,
Yes.
so I don't know if some of these have already been addressed.
So what happened when Greg did his review, it was based on his old site plan. And Jeff, you sent me the new site plan. It's also loaded up now in a PDF form. The maps that you're looking at are the most recent site plans. So, but it is in the Google Drive.
Okay,
Okay, but your comments were done before that new site plan came in. And I guess, Jeff, again, for your applicant, we gotta have an agreement that things can't filter in haphazardly, because it just makes it more difficult for the board to know what they're dealing with. I think we have everything that's most recent. And so we should be able to go forward from here. So you definitely have the most recent site plan, and the same for the board. It should be under maps. I don't remember the date, but it is the most recent one. Go ahead, Greg.
yeah, so most of my comments are not significant. I had a question about the school buses. There was number of students and the size of the buses. It showed 2 buses on the traffic plan, but whether or not those buses are being parked somewhere on site and where they're being parked or not in use, I think it just showed how they would deliver students to the building. But the question was, are those staying on site and where are they being?
No, I'm certain that the big ones aren't, unless during the weekends, during the off season, that they do actually come and stay for the weekend and take people back, but
Okay.
definitely not during the summer.
Okay,
During the summer, there's only 2 small buses, one for girls, one for boys, and it's really the staff's kids going to day camps at other facilities.
okay.
And Jeff, the way we do this with other projects is when Greg sends out a letter, it usually goes directly, or I tell him to send it directly to the engineer.
Mhm.
So in addition to Greg, you sending it to Jeff, which engineer should these comments go to?
You know, I got 3 engineers on this plan, so one of them is the general engineer that was here last time, and then we have Ned Black and Eggers doing the water and sewer, so they're.
Okay, so Menedak and Eggers is the engineer for water and sewer,
Yeah,
and Mr. Medic is the
Yes.
engineer for everything else.
yes,
So what we do, Greg will send that out to Mr. Medic also, and we expect the engineer to respond to Greg
mhm.
and to the chair so that I can get it out to the entire board, the response. So that letter that you have there, Jeff, we need a response to that, even though it's based on old site plan. We're just responding to what we had at that time. Greg will do another one to pick up on any other elements from the new site plan. We'll send it directly to Mr. Medic, and he'll always copy you and the applicant so that you know what's going on. Okay, go ahead, Greg, keep going.
Other than that, there were some comments on the landscaping, which relates to the new code and whether or not the planning board, considers those to be of issue or not. I think in the previous application, the planning board's waived some of those requirements that are in the new code with regards to the caliper of the trees, the height. So I just was bringing that up. And then the other major comments is on the engineering report for the sewer and the water. To me, this would seem to be more classified as a boarding school based on what's been defined. And the 55 gallons per day, I guess, was being made in reference to a hotel. But in the code or the section of the requirements for that, or even the section of the requirements for boarding school, it references the restaurant facilities, the additional flow requirement, because a hotel, normally somebody would come stay at a hotel, but they're not necessarily
Being fed,
eating
yeah.
and being fed
Right.
at the hotel. Where with boarding school, they would be
Okay.
being fed. So I think the boarding school is more applicable. And then the other thing is the newer guidelines for, which is one of the questions that I had, but the newer guidelines for the hotels makes reference to the water saving devices. So it's 110 for buildings that have been built after 94. But if this building was originally built in 74 and it hasn't been completely renovated, then it wouldn't have water saving devices. So then it would be 150 and not 110. So then 150 divided by 2 is 75. So it brings you right back to the boarding school.
All right, so Greg, as quickly as possible, now that you have the new site plan, I need you to redo that memo
Okay.
of the important items that you didn't see before, because you had the old site plan. And specifically about water, and I know we'll probably have comments from other people about water, but Jeff, what it boils down to is that, well, I think Greg said it very well, but it's not, we disagree with Bed and Beck's numbers at the bottom line. And they're fine, but they were fine for 40 years ago, but 30 years ago. The particular and applicable material from the state or from the county would suggest that it's higher than 110. And on top of that, because you're feeding them presumably 3 meals a day, there's an additional add-on for cafeteria services or whatever. So we might be up as high as 75 or 85 per person. Ergo, 85, if that's what it is, and I'm just guessing, I think I'm close, but 85 times the number of people that he's projecting, 172, whatever that comes out to, does it equal the well capacity that you've described as being the case? I think that was 9,500. Somebody do that math real quick. 172 times 85, what do we come up with?
Well, I don't know that it's 85.
Okay, I'm not even gonna go there then, but the point is, between
The numbers gotta work.
the board members, and Jennifer, we'll hear from you in a second. We need your engineer and our engineer to work closely together so that by the end of this month, when you guys come back, we have either agreement or we have something that has to be negotiated, whatever. But we gotta have enough water using the current codes. Greg, anything else that you want to comment on?
That's the primary thing, but that ties into a bunch of things, because it ties into the water supply, it ties, well, you've got a speedies permit associated with the subsurface disposal system. And I think the Department of Health should also weigh in.
They've all been notified by Barry, asked for their opinion as to what the proper rate is for this building.
And then the other thing was the single family homes, there's 2 of them on there. And that was one of my comments is that did not appear to be applied into the calculation. So that would need to be included in the calculation for those demands. And then little confirmation letter from the Department of Health and the DEC for the speeds.
Okay. So I'm gonna open it up to the board. For any comments. Jennifer?
Just to add in terms of, I think getting the number, the water use number right is really important. And Greg, I assume we're using the 2014 design standard.
Yes.
So we're looking at the same document. So Greg noted that this is likely fits best in a boarding school. If we look at the boarding school numbers, there are like footnotes. Those footnotes have additional water requirements per employee. In addition, they have additional flow based on the food service operations table. We should take a look at that and think about what would be most appropriate. And that's what I would add to that. So I think the boarding school number is 75. So then there's additional to that for food service and for employees and for the house, the two homes as well.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yes.
Sorry?
Yeah, I have a couple of minor, but I noticed on EAF, page 1, they're writing approximately 175 and 15. Should that approximately change to maximum?
You mean the number of people?
Right. In EAF form?
Well, at some point we have to. I mean, the decision is gonna say you have a maximum number of people. But in addition to that, I'm gonna be asking the building department through Mike Bannick and what you're doing, what is the maximum number of people for this building? So the clients defined it as 172 or 175. Is that what it is, or is something higher? Because that has a lot to do. We can't, it's very difficult to enforce what we put down as the maximum based upon water supply, right?
No, I understand.
But it's easier to do it for a building department.
That's for.
So you're asking whether or not it's 175 is a maximum, is that your question?
When they submit the documentation, they should write at maximum 175. Obviously, it's up to proven with enough water, but we cannot write approximately 175 in EAF, it's my opinion. So just for the sake of records.
Dave?
It's a disclosure form. If
It
you
would
want to
be-
have the word approximate stricken, that's easily done.
And one more.
Who's gonna do, you want the applicant to do it or?
Is it 172? Is it 175?
It says approximately 157 and approximately 15 staff.
15
Right.
staff.
So it's 172.
It was done, what
My
date?
number was the 172, subject to
This is
what we
2025.
find out.
What was the date it did?
The document is the 2025-04-25 secret.
It says 152 plus.
Yeah.
staff,
What date
172.
did he fill it out?
Um,
It's on the bottom last
It's at
page,
very beginning, most likely.
prepared by somebody dated.
22, April 22, 2025. The map.
Okay,
Jeff, just give us a number without the words approximate.
Mhm.
Okay, go ahead. What
Uh,
else are we?
One, on site plan, item, page 1, item 5. It says now proposed use camp in the summer, resort in the winter. Should it change to religious school or something like that?
Yes.
Okay, anybody else?
Yes.
Helena?
One of the, I mentioned this to Greg, but any DEC permit for wastewater discharges less than 10,000, you have to have new permit renewal into the DEC by June 10th, 2025 to remain authorized to discharge sanitary sewage from your facility. So you need to make sure that your DEC permit is going to, I mean, we did get confirmation that you had the permit, but there is an important notice on the website that says you need to renew it.
Just for him or for everyone?
For anybody with discharges,
And if they don't meet the date, what happens? They have to-
talk to the DEC. I don't know, it just is something I came across.
When
when
are
I
they gonna
was-
stop using it?
It's for,
25th, 2025.
yeah.
It has to be done, it has to be.
To continue coverage to, by June 10th, 2025, to remain authorized to discharge sanitary sewage from your facility. So you just make sure that you don't let that lapse. And that, while we're in the process, so you have a permit.
Okay, only there, anything else?
That's it.
Anybody have anything else?
Yeah, just a note about the water. I know they're working on the water concerns and volumes, but just a reminder that on Ridgeview, water has been a concern on other applications, just a general note.
Yeah.
So I think we need to be careful with it.
Yeah.
Jeff, talk to us.
Peter, how important amount of water for fire as well, right?
They draw water for fire from the pond.
It's a draft site.
Jeff?
Yeah, look, clearly, the water issue is the most important here, and that's the one that my client's got to focus on and his engineers got to focus on. The rest of it, I think we've met with still some fine tuning, but the safety plan, I think, is a much more what you were looking for than before. In terms of the type of lighting and plants and things like that, we'll make sure that we amend it. So I really came tonight to hear what you guys had to say, and I appreciate the comments, and we're going to do our best to get the responses.
It's really, I don't mean to tell you how to do your job with the applicant, but it's really important you explain to the applicant's engineer, that he's got to be real responsive to
Yeah.
Greg. And we'll work through some of these items, like with the landscaping. Our landscape law is a little bit wonky in defining the size of the trees. And for other projects, absent a new changes to that code, we've been flexible in waiving some of the requirements for the sizes of the trees. So he wants to pay attention to that, and Greg can tell him how to resolve that through the board. Okay, so it's really important that he looks at it and makes the comment, this doesn't make any sense. Spoke to Greg and said, yeah, we know it. The code needs to be adjusted, but you can ask for a waiver. So we're not stuck with, he agrees to it, but it's like, when we find out the cost of doing it. Okay. Good.
Couple points. One, they're on record saying there's no land disturbance. Is that still true, Jeff?
Correct.
So you got to bear in mind, a lot of your standards relate to the fact that there's construction, and there's no construction here. It's all interior, it's all interior renovation, correct? Except for, as you stated before.
Well, I don't think we're asking him anything.
I'm just noting,
Right. But is there
they're
something we
not
asked?
doing
him
any
for?
building.
No, is there something we asked him for that we shouldn't have because he's not doing any
Well,
building?
landscaping may be something you're pressing because he's not proposing to put a new building up.
But he proposed to do landscaping.
Right,
So if he's proposing, I'm just telling him,
okay.
don't stick
just-
yourself.
I mean, we'll have to read the code. Second, it was my impression the new owner was trying to live within the existing parameters of permits. You're not increasing the occupancy, right, of what was previously there. We're struggling to get prior permits. Do you have access to those?
For example, what do we?
Health department.
I'm sure he does, though. I know he's meeting with,
It would be useful to see what Villa Veritas got approved for. To see what, if we're living within this concept that you're trying to continue the level of occupancy that was previously approved, just for a slightly different use, right?
well, not exactly, no, his occupancy is larger
Right,
than
okay.
it was. The occupancy before was, I think, 70 plus,
Somewhere near 90.
75 plus staff, 90 altogether, and so he's more, he's than that, so we're gonna.
Okay, well, then that goes to my second part here. You've got some sort of vague, the maps have some vague locations of, I don't even know, it says well. There's a utility building, I'm assuming the circle next to it's the well, but it's not identified. And there's a arrow to a vague place about where the septic field is. You probably need to I'll defer to Greg, but you probably need these things,
Located.
delineated and located.
I think that's one of my comments.
And there's also stray things on the map. There's an existing septic sitting in the middle of one place. I don't know. It actually points to two locations. Are they in use? There's various fuel storage tanks existing. Does that mean you're going to continue to use them? That would probably relate to safety plans
And
too.
what size are they?
If any of those things are gonna, we took it on face in your previous meetings that you weren't changing any of those, but
Mhm.
it's just not clear that. While the site plan says they're existing, does that mean they're gonna be continued to be used?
And do they have permits?
Well, I was gonna ask, so I can't remember if I asked this before, but they'll be getting a new C of O. Will they be getting a new C of O from the?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's a whole new use,
Yeah, okay, so then
a
they'll.
change of use.
Have a plan review as part of
I'm sorry, what?
that. So there'll be a plan review as part of the new C of O for this. Because I see things on here that I'm concerned about. I want to make sure that they get captured by the building department as part of their review. And we're saying there's not going to be any construction, but for example, this what you gave here, what you given as an evacuation plan has been put together by someone that's never done an evacuation plan before. There's spaces here. The sizes of egress openings are determined by the occupancy load. And then you determine the width of the opening by that occupancy load. And you have spaces here like a dining room that has one single door to the exterior. And you also have egress, I brought this up last time, through other spaces. These are really, really fundamental fire safety issues. And I want to make sure that someone's going to capture them. If it's up to us, happy to do it, and we'll provide comments.
Well,
But
if you could provide comments
Yeah.
to Peter,
Yeah.
because it's vital for the
yeah,
fires.
we'll do that, but I think that.
I don't want to make any comments on what the building department is going to do in
Yeah.
this regard.
Yeah.
I'll just leave that be. I think if we can pick up on these and Dave, you can share them with Peter,
Yeah.
or even join that meeting.
Yeah, and the other, overall note is this is an older wood frame building.
Live spring?
Yes.
Because I wonder if the water is.
So there's sprinklers. How do these sprinklers get charged?
That's a good question. I know on one of my previous visits there with the fire department, many of the sprinklers were covered.
With
Cups,
cups?
They were disabled.
they were disabled. So I think that was addressed with the building department, fire and safety, fire inspector.
Which reminds me, there's also something in the safety plan that talks about a contingency tank of 10,000 gallons of water, based water system, pump system goes down. I saw it somewhere in the safety plan.
I believe they do have a,
Yeah. Me too.
They have a,
That's a-
okay,
I think they do have
maybe
a
that's with, that's the,
sprinkler system tank.
okay, that's the charging. Okay.
And is there a way to confirm if there's sufficient pressure?
I don't
Does that
know,
mean-
because I haven't seen it.
I'll try to get someone else.
All right, so Jeff.
Good.
We need to try to summarize. Greg is going to redo his letter. Dave, I think you ought to redo your letter. And just zero in with bullet points on the comments, the key critical comments that you've heard tonight and that you have. And then Jeff, your guy, Mr. Medic, needs to be responsive to that, to get back to us. We'll do this, we'll do that, can't do this, whatever it may be, so that when we come back on the 28th, we're in a position to say, with the exception of X, Y, and Z, everything looks good. But we'll endeavor to get the safety plan done, what, in about 2 weeks?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
If you need me, call me. All right, next is Meta. Which is.
Good evening.
Eric, how are you?
Good to see you,
And Matt, and your lovely wife. Um, So Matt and Eric, I think the board is. We're just looking for where you're at. So the floor is yours. Is everybody ready? Sure.
You want to wait for Lori to start?
He'll catch up.
So since we last saw you, done a decent amount of work. Soil testing was done at the site. That was pretty significant in determining the overall disturbance because I was able to design all the septic systems. Soils were just amazing at the site. It's exactly what you want. It's all sand and gravel, pretty much. Really highly absorptive soils. So all the footprints for the septic systems were very small, which helped to decrease the overall disturbance. It kept us under that 5 acre threshold. For the full SWIP. So that was one of the biggest unknowns prior to this meeting.
And when you did that split, you included that extra lot, that 11th lot.
That includes the extra lot, yeah. Yep. So that was something that we did. So knowing that information, I was able to prepare the SWIP. So that was submitted. It's just a basic one for erosion sediment controls during construction. There was, I mean, I know you guys were concerned about runoff going into the pond, so I did put a drainage analysis together, analyzing all the stormwater going to the pond. I put that report together, so it shows that there is minimal increase to the runoff in the pond during the 100-year storm, and there's basically none in the 10 or 1 year storm. And I believe it's a groundwater fed pond. Just because the entire drainage area, all the soils are very absorptive. So the model showed pretty much everything is going into the ground. And the soils are everything's so flat out there. There's no, yeah.
And both the SWIP and the drainage plan are up on the Google Drive. So if anybody wants to look. Great.
We're taking a look at it.
Okay.
I just.
Go ahead.
I'm from Gilson.
Yes, like I said, I designed all the septic systems. That's been submitted to the health department. We had a landscape architect take a look at the landscaping plan, so she revised some of the trees based on what she thought would do better in this area, in these soils. We have a typical home planting plan added with a planting schedule. It's kind of like a menu to select. And then there's some, planting notes as well, just specifying certain things. And then, so we're set up to do the well test. The well's gonna be drilled Monday. And then we'll get that hydrogeologic study done, all the monitoring neighboring wells.
And you'll be talking to Greg about that. Right?
Yeah, we had that meeting. We
Yes.
kind of went over protocols with Russell and
Did you, did anybody volunteer to have their well monitored?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, how many, could you,
Three.
could you provide us with that information? Would be helpful. That's great.
I think that's about all that I had. The layout hasn't really changed.
Okay. The only question I have is, two. Explain to me what you're doing with the DEC in terms of that lake and the sanctity of the lake, or preserving that lake and it not collapsing into the Metacons.
I mean, that's something we're gonna get to. I mean, it's absolutely on the radar. We haven't begun that process yet, but we are gonna do it with the DEC. I mean, it's not the lake that's gonna cause any failure, it's the creek. That's where all of the erosion's coming from. So it's something that absolutely needs to be addressed, and we plan on it.
So do you plan on doing it before the public hearing, before we give approval, after the public hearing? All right, so the basis for doing it after is your belief is that there's nothing happening on the property that you're doing on the property by way of construction or septic or anything else that's gonna increase the danger from your side. It's more what the creek is doing to your lake or to your property. Is that basically what you're?
What it's been doing for decades.
It's entirely from the creek.
Well, one of the things that I did observe when I was out there was the riser pipe that's there is very, very high, and you can see where the high water was, which was within 30 feet from the drop off into the Metacahonks. So maybe a quick fix, and this is really not anything to do with any approvals, but if you cut that riser pipe so that the water doesn't go that far.
Doesn't get quite as
It doesn't
high.
quit and doesn't, because you've got hydrostatic loading
Sure.
when that lake is full. And so when you have that water and then you have a flood event, that's where you're gonna get it collapse. And then you might ultimately lose that lake. So you may wanna
Yeah, we can take a
look at it that way.
Yeah, yeah.
And then also contact Brian Drum and see if he has any recommendations, but it's more, I think, of an engineering issue.
Yeah, somehow stabilizing. that.
Yeah, and they're not gonna allow you to rip wrap it. And I mean,
And that's
what's
the
that
obvious
slope, 50
solution.
feet or something?
Yeah.
It's a class A
near-
stream, they're not gonna, I doubt they will allow any hardening,
Right, well,
but anyway, that was just something that I noted when we
yeah,
were in the
lowering,
field.
that makes
It makes some
yeah.
sense.
So I just want to make it clear to the board, my opinion, and a few of you that I've talked to is the integrity of that lake is not an issue that we're dealing with
Correct.
unless my attorney tells me
Right.
you off your rocker. But because there's no impact of anything that's going on this property to that lake, the viability of that lake, in my opinion, I'm not a geologist or a water person, whatever. So it's kind of off the table in terms of what we're doing. We did the SWIP, included the 11th lot. You're doing the hydrological study. You're doing the water quality study. You've identified pretty much where the dumped material or the buried material is. You're actually doing the water study in that area, the water quality study. So all the things that we've asked for in terms of problems caused by past events are being dealt with. The one I don't believe that we can deal with is the viability of that lake.
Oh, yeah, it has nothing, it's just a.
Okay, I
it's
just want to
a-
make sure.
No, it's just a recommendation.
Appreciate it.
I've got 20.
No, I realize that,
25 years
just-
of field experience in constructing lakes and seeing
But
streams.
that's gonna be
erode.
my mantra if that comes out in a public hearing. It's like, well,
Well, and the thing you could add is also it's a class C dam, so it's a low hazard dam. There's not,
right.
if unfortunately something were to happen, and there's not significant impact to life or property as a result of it. So.
Are you satisfied with this?
I don't understand, maybe you're not saying it.
I might not be.
Oh, when you say the impact on the lake, do you mean, as Jim was saying, the problems with the dam and possibly, too much pressure on the dam or the ecological quality of the lake?
Not the ecological quality of the lake, it's more of additional pressure being put on. the
Okay,
lake
oh,
as-
okay.
Yeah.
As a result
It's
of.
Nothing to
All right.
do with any of, yeah.
But all
dam
the things that
safety
you're
and
talking
good
about in
engineering
terms of
practices.
water quality and the SWIP, they all go to the ecological quality of the lake, and I don't
Right.
see any reason to exempt that if there's
No, we're
fish in
not.
it or something like that. Okay, fine.
Right.
Good.
No, it has to do with the viability.
Of the dam.
You know what I mean?
Any other, does anybody have any questions for the applicant? All right, so I think we're at a point,
After you guys do the well tests and you get monitoring results, when you submit those back to us, could you ask them to update the existing memo and just dump in new sections so that we can see everything in one place? And that would also, in doing so, then you mentioned those really good soils, Russell had estimates of recharge and infiltration, you could update that section, and then we could have everything in one spot.
Yes, you're
And
talking
it
about
will-
Russell's.
Yeah. And that'll also maybe save a little bit of time and money, because you've already sort of got something.
Okay, so I'm happy with what the applicant has done.
Yeah.
Very happy, and I as far as I'm concerned, I'd like to see us do the public hearing on June 9th, and I think that works for your schedule. So I'd entertain a resolution or
Motion,
a motion, thank you. You want a motion
sure, to schedule the public hearing or
for June 9th?
make a motion to schedule the public hearing on June 9th.
A second.
Dave Roberts will second. So we have to get a notice out. We have lots of time.
Yeah.
Take a vote.
Oh, think about it. Take a vote. All in favor?
I,
Anybody opposed? Thank you. And I agree, 7-0. So June 9th. Get us all the other information. I'm sure we'll have it before the end of of May.
Yeah.
It sounds like we will have all that information. I think we're good to go.
Right.
Thanks, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Let's hold it back here. All right. Wow, moving right along.
That's right.
Why did you say something?
All right, where's Rap Tov, congregation? MCRT, MRCT? Good evening. Where did Moshe go?
sorry.
All right, so we have, it's officially Pine Grove, application, and, they've been here before, I guess it was 2 meetings ago, right? And, you provide us with some additional information. Mr. Cleese, why don't you update us? There are 2 major things that I saw that need to be discussed. It's the changes to the narrative that you made.
Correct.
And also the additional maps that were delivered to us. So you have maps at the bottom of your file. And there's also very large maps on the table over there, which we may want to look at some point in time. But if you look at your file, the last map in the file, it's green colored, it's showing, keep going, Hans, the one on the
I
bottom.
see something.
There it is, that one. So that's the latest and greatest map that we've got from the applicant. It's the most up to date. Please go ahead. Why don't you update us on what you changed and
Over the last before the board, this is an application to create a kitchen and a dining hall for the former Pine Grove Family Dude Ranch, the Pine Grove Resort. The resort is a 126,570 person permitted facility. Currently, their existing dining halls require several shifts of dining just by the amount of people that can physically fit in the dining hall. The kitchen itself is very dated. It goes back to probably the creation of the camp. When we last spoke to the board, they wanted to know what we were planning on doing with some of the unoccupied spaces in the basement and the mezzanine. On the basement level, we have storage now that's unfinished, as well as mechanical rooms. On the main floor, you have the mezzanine, you have the dining hall, the new kitchen and lobbies. And then on the second level, offices and classrooms and storage. We've listed on the cover page of the plans what would be in the rooms as well as in the narrative. And in the rooms themselves, we're looking to create some recreational areas with billiards, pool tables, stuff of that nature, arcades, table tennis. They would like to eventually have a fitness and wellness area with yoga studios and gyms. There's an entertainment area that they'd like to have, which would be with a small theater and some arcades. And then some social spaces, some lounges, some cafes, and perhaps a bar. To round out the areas that would have been unoccupied by the dining hall and the kitchen.
And that's listed on page 3 of 11
Yep.
in the narrative. Now,
Some things weird.
we also have very large plans.
Also, the board had asked us to look at the amount of parking. Currently on the asphalt parking areas, there's 73 parking spaces, including 3 handicaps. The old Pine Grove Dude Ranch facility, it had some accessory parking in some grass areas. And that would give a total parking count of approximately 150 spaces. Not that they believe that they will be necessary to use those accessory spaces. Because as we've stated before, most people, they come by bus and they leave by bus, and the parking is not overly utilized. The board had asked us to provide them with some turning information for the loading dock facility, which is included on sheet 8. And we've also included some floor plans from the architect as well as elevation and rendering.
So Mike, just give me a second. These plans, obviously, they're very large. Give an idea of the use of some of that space in the basement that we asked.
Yes.
The applicant tell us about the use.
Oh, well, sorry about that, I might have been unclear, but the unused space is, it's on page 3, it's listed here on the side. And like I said, they're looking to have recreational areas for billiards, pool tables, tennis table, table tennis. They're looking for a yoga and a fitness studio, a small gymnasium perhaps. Some entertainment spaces, a movie theater and an arcade, social spaces, you have lounges, bars and cafes.
And Mike, those,
Bar and or cafe.
Mike, those large maps have that also. Later,
Correct.
right?
And it's also listed on the cover page of the site. On a small table here.
Okay.
So these spaces are delineated on the maps, like,
Well, this is the future use. The main purpose of this is so that they can have a dining hall and an updated
I
kitchen.
understand it, but there was the question regarding the lower level was like, you were saying there's gonna be some storage down there and.
Well, that's why we listed what the potential is that they'd like to put into the basement.
They're not on the, it's not on the.
So I think with the attorney.
They
is
have an
asked-
architect. Which is
So this is just a list of potential uses, but it's not really a plan that you're gonna implement in the short term.
No, right now, that, like I said, is if they have to get the money to do the building. And their primary purpose is for the dining hall. All right, because right now they dine about 270 people by code, right, by the space in the building department. A building code, right, and what happens is they have to have 3 shifts of dining at meals by the number of campers that are potential campers and staff. So they need at least 2 to 3 meals just to get everyone fed. So this big dining hall, the dining hall itself would allow them to do that in 1 meal. Thus not having to utilize the kitchens for extended periods of time. And also modernizing the kitchens would allow them to reduce the amount of energy as well as water and wastewater that they produce.
Okay, so what I want to confirm, the last time you were here 2 meetings ago, we know all that about, and then we had pointed out that there was a lot of space, the whole basement space, and then that loft there, right? And we said we're reluctant to go further because we want to know the use of all that space. And it was primarily, are you adding more people to the site because of the use of that space? So what I believe you've given us is a description of uses for that extra space, the whole downstairs and the upstairs, what I call loft area. You've told us the uses that you're planning. Those would be uses used by the people, by the 520 some odd people that are permitted to be on the site right now by the health department, based upon water and septic. So those uses are not adding more people, correct?
Correct. There's no additional rooms, no additional people proposed. The second floor plan shows a schematical layout of what they'd like to do on the second floor eventually. These uses are more for the basement, which I'm stating, right? Because there's about, after the mechanical room, there's plus or minus 19,000 square feet. All right, so in that 19,000 square feet, this is what they're envisioning and doing down there.
And where are the uses of the upstairs, where are they listed here?
It's basically some offices and classrooms.
The question was, where are they listed in the narrative or where do you have those?
They're depicted on the second floor architectural plan.
What is the sheet number? Because it's not here.
It's an A number.
Helena, where?
It should be depicted on sheet A 104.
So it's those big maps.
Yeah, you'll be able to see it a lot easier.
What map number?
A 104.
A 104.
Right, and right now, what we have,
Whatever was online, I mean, now forward, before, second floor was completely subdivided in offices and the classroom. No, it was like here. And here.
Michael, could you
No,
just
it's not.
clarify a number for me? You said right now the permit's for 570 people, right?
Correct.
And then you've been feeding, so in order to feed everyone, you have three times 270?
no, it's 249 people by code. That's what's, the existing dining room is about 3,700 square feet. And this is off the top of my head, it's 15, one person for 15 square feet. It works out to be about 249 people, say 250 people by seating.
Okay.
So there's a little overage there. They don't have 250 each seating because that wouldn't work. That'd be 750 if there were 3 seats.
Right, that's the
So
numbers,
there's
right?
there's odd numbers.
Yes, the numbers.
Again, you're warranting to us that it's 500 some odd people.
That's correct. Well, they have an existing permit. And on that permit, it limits them by the number of.
And if you remember, the biggest issue that we had last time was reassure this board that the uses that you're planning for all that extra space are not gonna jack that number up.
No.
Of course, once you jack that number up, you gotta go to the, you
Correct.
got water problem, water issues and septic issues.
Well, you would have to go back to the department
Right,
of Health for
okay.
approval
So-
and to me, you'd probably have to come back to the board as well, right?
Yeah, you would.
So I mean, you know, so to change the number of rooms or the number of people, which they're interconnected, that would require additional approval.
Okay, so just to clarify, when we're giving our approval, I'll turn to my attorney. Those other uses that you're talking about, there could be some of those other uses that you've described for us, and I thank you for describing them. You still may have to come back for some of those other uses because they're not within the scope of this use. This use was a cafeteria, right? You're talking about game rooms and all that, and that's great. You've reassured me at least, and perhaps the rest of the board, that those are uses for the existing people up to 500 and some odd numbers of people. Existing uses for the existing people who frequent this site. But the actual use, you still may have to go back to the building department to get those extra uses approved if you should implement them. That's all I'm saying.
I don't believe the applicant would object to going back to the building department and if necessary, referral to the planning. board.
Well, they'll decide if they have to come back to us. I don't know.
That's what I mean, so
But
I don't
on
believe.
one of
that
the
would be a
first
problem.
meetings that we had, I think it was Bill who said, if there's other uses other than the described use here, you would have to go back to the building department. Again, those uses are not increasing the number of people from what I can see. Unless you're inviting the whole neighborhood to come in and play in the Penny Arcade, but, so that was the main issue. So the board understand what
I do. Do we have the permits that were given? Do we know, has the Board of Health looked at what we're approving and saying the
they have
septic?
they have an existing Board of Health permit
Do we have that in our?
for
record?
X, that's a good question, I don't know.
I don't see, I don't think we have
do.
it here, and I think we should have it here.
Yeah, it's DEC permit
You wanna
55,
get it first?
5870. We'll
Yeah,
transmit you a
it
copy
should
of that.
transmit it
That's
to
not
us, and then with a building of 50,000 square feet, how are you gonna heat it?
To
With
me,
diesel?
I have, to me, I would assume,
Okay.
but that's
ju-
why you have the mechanical rooms in the basement,
Okay.
because nobody wants to bury a tank any longer.
Just know, anything over 10,000 gallons, you might need a bulk.
Yeah, of course, but yeah, no, that's not a problem, but like I said, we'll transmit you the permit. The heating in the building, I don't know, it's 50,000 square feet is the total floor area, it's about approximately 22,000 on the footprint. So,
Okay,
I
I have one more item, but I want to hear from the board. Go ahead.
I have a question, Thomas, if this plan showing offices, classroom, sinks, toilets, does it mean that we are approving? Does it mean that they really need to go another time?
No, we're not approving the other uses. We asked for a description of what the other uses would be in order to reassure us that they're not increasing the number of people on site.
But they're showing on this plan offices, a classroom, with the closets, with the sinks, individual sinks for each room,
So how do we handle that?
with
Well,
the toilets.
there's
So
two
what
different
is the use for them?
One is, I think Zorian's talking about the second floor.
Right.
And they are applying for it. I mean, it's, they've got on the site plan. And remember the concern, Rick, the concern was that they were creating a lot of space that we did not know how it was going to be handled. It might have been for other people in certain circumstances. They're now on the second floor, they're giving us uses and they're creating. I don't see why not. Now, the basement is an interesting case because they didn't really create a site plan out of it or even a, building plan. And they also didn't say that they're gonna do this immediately. They're sort of saying these are potential uses. But remember the purpose of that. They came with those uses because we said, we want to know what you might use it for so that you don't bring in other people. If we don't make that part of the site plan and part of the conditions that it's limited to those uses, we've functionally done nothing other than sort of,
So we
kind
need
of-
to make it as part of the decision.
Yeah, I mean, when people say things to us that are of importance, we have, that becomes part of the certificate, that becomes part of the condition, because otherwise we can sort of ask some questions that don't matter that much, and I don't think this was a question that didn't matter, so I would say on the bottom level that there's no particular depiction of what they're gonna be using for, but these are the allowable uses, and they have to come back to the board for anything else, and that way, the building inspector can send it back to us, and it's already rolled out. On the second floor, they're actually laying out, the site, and that's what they're getting permit for. If they want, if having heard this, they really want to sit down and think about it some more, they're certainly welcome to, but we can't ask them questions that are important, have them nominate certain things and not be of value, they'll just get.
Okay,
answers
that makes sense.
That don't make.
So on that basis, you might expect to see on the drawing basement future
If they want,
assembly.
but if they, obviously then,
Yes.
if they don't, then to the extent that that the use, that other uses get implemented, potentially even if those uses get implemented, because they're changing use, and to the extent that the building inspector would require a site plan for a particular construction, I mean, in other words, the more they do now that they ultimately do in the future, the less they're gonna have to get permitted in the future. If they leave it vague, that would satisfy us for now, because we'll put them in as the conditions, and then how it's permitted in the future is gonna be up to the CEO and what we ask. Yeah. So,
Dave, I like your idea of putting it future uses, listing the future uses on the drawing, like maybe as a note or something.
okay,
Then it's
So what-
defined,
so-
so the,
belts and suspenders.
yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Dave, clarify, can you like that? So we are not approving second floor.
We are.
Layout.
We are.
We are.
Just put it on a map. Why not?
Okay, so now it's question,
They're presenting us a map to satisfy us.
right, so
That's what
now,
we're gonna approve.
then I have a question, why classroom? Has a closet, why it has an individual sink, why there are toilets, seems to me it's basically living quarters. It's a living quarters, in my opinion. Potential living quarters.
Because it's a classroom with a toilet and sink.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
the sink is sometimes used in classrooms, particularly for kindergarten.
All right, so
but this is not kindergarten.
all right, so let's ask the applicant, are any of these second floor uses residential uses?
No.
All right, so the decision will say there are no residential uses permitted for this building.
That's the answer.
Yeah.
There's also no shower or bath facilities on the second floor.
You can imagine
Bathrooms,
reasons why you-
toilets and sinks.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So Dave Church, I hope I'm making notes of this, but when we do the decision,
I mean, I haven't reviewed it.
You have a
Want me to
different-
review?
You have a different take on the?
No, that makes sense to me. I'm just noting on the EAF, you don't show any other agency permits. That's not gonna be true.
Like I say, we're not changing any of the use, other than the special, with you guys, with the planning board, you're in approval. But we're not changing the number of occupants, campers. We do not have a disturbed area greater than an acre or 40,000 square feet. We should not need a speedies permit. I mean, I guess,
Health department for the
I think with the,
kitchen, right?
what?
You need
The
health.
health department for the kitchen, but that's a building department issue. That's,
It's just that the form's gotta be,
you know,
And
we should
there-
probably for county agency put UC Department of Health, just so we can get, if we wanna coordinate with anybody.
And then also the wastewater
Yeah.
permits.
And then the fuel tank issue is not in play or?
I don't
know,
I'm not an
but the-
architect, I don't know what.
The other thing is if you have a DEC permit for wastewater discharges less than 10,000 gallons per day, you have to renew the permit by June something 2025. It's just.
Yeah, no, it's a standard. They just did the same thing with Speedy's permits.
Yes.
It was the 2020 version and it
Yes.
became the 2025 version, so that's just something that DEC is doing, because they updated their codes.
Just letting you know. since
No,
you
I
told the
appreciate
other
it.
person.
No, appreciate it.
One more quick. You
Okay.
got the new code again. That's in the aquifer overlay. You've got that trigger of. I think the CEO classified this as it's day camp resort, right?
No,
Which-
it's non-conforming.
Yeah, well, I'm just trying to go with the language of the. Code. We gotta pick residential or commercial. Which is, what is this? It's commercial, any use or activity projected on on-site groundwater withdrawals. And or on-site sewage disposal flows over 1,000 gallons. Has to do a hydrogeological study.
Oh, right.
If it's residential, it's 2,000.
Uh,
That's why there's the triggering number here.
Why would we do that if they already have a?
Hydro,
It doesn't make a distinction with whether you already do it or not. It's a use seeking special permit. I don't know, it's brand new language. It says you gotta do one. If you're projected on-site groundwater withdrawal or on-site sewage disposal flows are that number.
I believe.
It doesn't
our
say
argument
whether
was-
it's existing or proposed.
I believe our argument is that we have an existing permit with an existing number of campers and rooms, right? We're not changing any of that, so the net change in any of our sewage or water requirement, water needed would be zero. So
Now,
we're not
this-
withdrawing any more water, we're not injecting any more wastewater.
Yeah,
So
so
we'd
I
ask
pose
for
it
a
more as
waiver
a,
of the.
I'm posing it more as a question. And this is zoning, not subdivision regulations, so you don't have broad authority to waive this.
Oh. yeah. So, Dave. The other
Be
Dave,
researched.
what do we do?
So we don't have authority to waive any provisions of.
No, there's certain discrete waiver permissions in the zoning code.
This,
The height, for example, of this telecommunication tower.
oh, so by discrete, you mean it's specified in the particular,
In subdivision regulations, this board has authority to waive anything in that chapter.
what's the exact language of the requirement for because the argument here is that they're not changing, is that despite the fact they're getting a newer or special use permit, that they're not actually changing the hydrologic withdrawal. Is that the argument?
Yes, sir.
How does that fit into the language?
Following uses and activities when proposed partially or wholly within the aquifer protection overlay shall be designated as type 1 actions. A hydrological study shall be required. And mitigation, including reduction in intensity or denial of use as necessary, shall be made to protect the water supply. And if we go, and there's an A or B, where residential use or any commercial mixed use or industrial.
Will they
use.
be over the residential thresholds as well, right?
It's the same language except 2,000 versus
They're
1,000.
gonna be there over 2,000, right?
Either way, you're over
Yeah,
two
Right,
thousand.
so that's not.
Yes.
The question is the first thing you read, which is when any use is proposed, right?
Correct.
But if they've already got permitted use, what's the jurisdiction for the special use permit? Just the change of
I haven't delved into it because the code enforcement officer is referring it to a pre-existing non-conforming
about
use, right?
because the argument is that there's no new use being proposed, that the use is a continuation, despite the fact that they need a permit. That's what I'm channeling, but
You're correct.
Dave, if you remember, this was the one that had an attachment from Mary Lou and an interpretation. And she refers to various sections of the code concerning non-conforming uses and.
Well, if you look at the zoning map, this parcel is isolated. It was kept in the, what you used to call rural conservation, what's it called? B5 now? I forgot what it's called.
C5.
Which allows camps and resorts.
Right.
While the surroundings do not anymore with the new zoning. So I'm not the quibble on that matter. It's not completely clear to me why it's
I'm not saying
even has to be considered pre-existing non-conforming. It's an allowed use now.
I'm not even going there. It's like setting aside the zoning, especially if it's allowed, they had a use before, they've got a use now, it's the same use. So, that's, therefore, they're gonna argue it's also the same hydrologic withdrawal, they're going into the same health department permits. So what's the trigger for the?
Question.
The only time that's.
And this is just a restatement of the code. She doesn't have any, she doesn't have any analysis.
You're right.
Like a paragraph.
The last time that we used this code that you're reading, Dave, was actually for Accord Social, where they were building something. So, and we required the hydrological study, we required, it was a type 1, which we sort of all blanched at, but it was because it was in the aquifer protection zone. This was one when I'm not arguing pro or con, I'm just trying to remember the facts. When they redid the zoning and introduced it in November of last year, you're absolutely right. They left this particular parcel out of any changes that they actually made to all the surrounding parcels. So all the surrounding parcels changed in terms of their what they could be used for. It was far more limited. You couldn't do any more camps, the whole 9 yards. This one was preserved because it was an existing camp.
I just want to be clear. The activity on the property is existing and continuing, right? This isn't something that ended a few years ago and you're still on the same permit, but it's not really there. This is happening basically up
It's
until very
continuing,
now.
it's nothing new.
Well, you're
There's
here
nothing
because you're changing, you're doing this, you're doing the dining area.
Correct,
But the operation is continuing.
the operation is continuing, correct.
And somehow, even though you're adding all these other things, you're not using any more water.
Technically, in my mind, we're using less water because we should have more efficient fixtures and.
You're putting in more fish
equipment.
fixes and you're not using any more water.
We're not using any more water, correct.
I don't get the trigger for here's what I think. My instinct is that they shouldn't be required to, but I don't want to decide this in 5 minutes. I want to go back and think about it, but I have to figure out what the trigger is here, and I might suggest, my instinct now is to interpret that language to mean that it's got to be some sort of a newer increased use and withdrawal, including if they have a permit for something, but it's been discontinued for a few years. I didn't consider that, but they're doing this now. So it's like, what?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I understand.
So for now, I'd say no.
Particularly given the modern fixtures are gonna reduce the intensity of use, which is the goal of this, but it does say any use or activity.
Yeah, but the question is, I get it, but I don't think about it, but the question is, can we just read into that it's gotta be some sort of a newer increased use? They're just doing the same thing.
Yeah, because you could argue, I mean, they already have a dining room.
They have a dining room, they're just making it bigger to accommodate one sitting,
And that's
presumably the same number of people.
Yeah,
one of the reasons why we're looking at the number of people and the number of activities and are you gonna be opening up to offices and that, then all of a sudden it opens that up. I need to think about it, but I'd have to, what I would then do is, my proposal would be to just read into that a requirement that it be some sort of a newer expanded use, despite the fact they need a special use permit or whatever, or they're doing something else on the property. If you're using 10,000 gallons a day and you build another aspect of the property which doesn't increase the water use, I'm having trouble with that, but.
So let's do this. I have one other comment to make on the project and might be one or two others, but. Why don't we, Dave Gordon, why don't you put together a memorandum of law for us?
Are you listening there?
Between now and our meeting of the 28th, when I would have them come back.
That would be May 28th.
May 28th.
That's a month and a half.
Right. No, it's a
A
month.
month.
It's a month. So why don't we do that? The only other comment that I have is, what's the pot? I've seen the color pictures. It's very impressive building. What's the possibility of selecting colors that make it look like it's more in the country than it's in the middle of Queens or Brooklyn or New York City. The stark black color around the windows is just stark. Can we make it, can we tone it down to make it look like it's sitting in the middle of the country, which it is? So see what you can do about the colors.
We tried very much when we proposed the design, which will match with the existing, not.
The other buildings, right?
Other buildings, and I think the designer made a perfect job.
So
Meaning
can
the
we
old
try a little
colors
harder?
are the same colors. The reason we are going with stone and stucco because this building is not with wood. So. we
Those
can-
other buildings were with wood,
Yeah, the old
they-
buildings, we just paint.
but they must
This
have
is
some
impossible
stone.
to paint.
They must have some stone and stucco that comes closer to more of a natural effect.
Meaning this stone and stucco, what we choose is the same color than the previous. The black is the exact, like the black one. And the more lighter color is, all our buildings are two-tone color. Black and taupe is the color, TOUB. And we exactly match the new building with this. We have just two colors. More from that, we built, the only building what we built, actually, we built two buildings. Since we bought that, we also match the same type of windows. It should also be everything the same.
Yeah, the windows are not a problem. Dave Roberts, are those in color, the big ones? Yeah.
So I think I looked at the right part of our code. I was looking at 140-20. Which covers non-conforming use. And there's a lot of guidance in there on architectural, provides a lot of architectural guidance. And I'm not an architect, but in my opinion, the proposed architecture doesn't incorporate the guidance that's in our code.
Dave, could you hold up, those are color pictures, aren't they? Or-
No, they're black and white.
Oh, they're black and white.
Where do we have the color?
the street.
Here's the color pictures.
Are they on the drive?
I don't think so.
Here's the.
I don't think that's right. Look under, Helena, look under architectural. In the drive, under this project, and look under the category architectural. I think there might be some colors there.
Sample. Nothing physically see. They never reproduce this.
Can we have a site visit?
It's okay.
You can have a site visit.
I think that's supposed to be.
Yes,
You get, make sure we get your permits.
What we do is we can also bring in a sample of color, so you can actually physically see it. The stucco manufacturers will give you color charts.
Yep.
So we could bring in a color chart and everybody can take a look at what the color will actually look like. And I don't believe the applicants are amenable to, maybe toning something a little differently.
Well, I think a side visit would be useful to.
Absolutely.
Context.
And
All right,
and also
so-
considering the code that Jennifer just talked about.
Yeah.
So Jennifer, what does the code suggest?
There's several sections on architecture in the code. This is in section 140-20B, I'm sorry, 140-20C7. Buildings should relate in scale and design features to surrounding buildings, showing respect for existing neighborhood architecture. Buildings shall avoid long uninterrupted walls or roof planes. Building wall offsets, including projections, etc. I mean, there's a lot in here on it. That's the one section. Then there's also 140-20C9. All building facades that are visible from adjoining streets or properties should exhibit features comparable in character to the front. So as to better integrate with the community, where such facades face adjacent residential uses, which I don't think applies here, landscape vegetative buffers.
Jennifer, is there a height restriction?
I checked on that, and I think it's either 35 or 45 feet, and I believe they comply.
They complied with
We
that.
can find all zone.
And my comment on the architecture is particularly because it's such a large building. I think it would be nice to have it conform with.
So Moshe, are you, as the applicant's representative, could we have a group meet with you to go through the colors and the architecture to try to make it more compliant with the code?
Of course.
All right, so could I, Dave Roberts, Dave is an architect? Would you be willing to meet with the applicant?
course, yeah.
Who else wants to volunteer? Like always to have two people. Somebody else want to volunteer?
I'll go.
Alina? All right, so will the two of you, Moshe is the applicant's representative, as a mover and shaker up there, so why don't you guys switch, phone numbers or emails or whatever, and do something in the next week or two? And see if we can't come up with, using the architectural section or the section of the code that Jennifer's
So I
referring to.
should probably double check my homework, and I believe this is what applies,
Yeah,
but,
no, I'll look at that.
yeah,
yeah.
okay.
Okay, so why don't we do that?
Okay.
All right,
Just so you understand, the applicant owns a larger piece directly across the street. So the applicant is on both sides of the road.
And you're saying that because
It's
it's
a-
not gonna be visible to anybody? The
What?
point is, it's not visible to anybody else?
yeah, but people drive on the road.
Did we see? I don't believe so. That's
That's the
my
point,
memory.
though.
I don't believe so, but that's something we can check for the architect.
People drive on that road.
Right?
Other people
Oh, no,
drive on the road.
absolutely. It's not, has nothing to do with the road itself, but the.
It's gonna be
we're
built
talking
out
about
at some point in
adjacent
time.
neighbors.
And we should try to set us, look. The other buildings look great, they blend in really great, this one kind of stands out.
Understood.
Both because of its size, okay, it's allowed, but because of the color, if we can do something to make it blend in, it would be appreciated. All right,
Of course, sure.
Hans,
I think you had some concerns about emergency exits.
on this one, no, that was with the other project. Where the evacuation exits wound up going back
No, I
into the
think in this
building,
one too.
not this one.
My mistake.
Anybody else? We want to do a visit also, Moshe, we want to, members of the board over the month of May, we'll spread it out. So, right, okay,
And you should take a look at that whole section, because there's other stuff in there that may apply, like about mechanical equipment and air conditioning, and, you know.
No, understood.
Yeah.
anybody else? Dave, would you just do a quick summary on this?
Sure.
Because you haven't done anything on it, but just a summary of what you're hearing today. Commentary on the things we asked for, the things done.
Should I wait for them to visit?
Yes. Yeah, that's it.
Dave, you
One more
I
question.
promise last
Is your
one.
middle name Stuart?
It's worse than me. It's a good one. I promise it's a good one.
Don't ever complain.
Using the existing footprint of the existing facility is gonna be demolished, and you're gonna construct this new one. I assume the camp will have to be closed that entire time, or are you setting up temporary,
No.
what happens in the interim during
I
construction?
believe they'll leave the kitchen and dining area in use until the new facility is ready, and then we'll. The existing dining hall and kitchen are within the existing main building. And then they will do the demolition of the kitchens and the dining halls.
So this is new construction, they're not.
Yeah, but
they're-
it's on the footprint of the existing building, no?
No, it's off the footprint.
It's off the footprint.
No,
Okay.
it's off, it's
Never-
adjacent to it.
Okay, gotcha.
Dave, Church, you had mentioned that there's an overlay, aquifer overlay.
Right.
Yeah, so that's something that if that triggers the fuel for the heating system, that might be something that you need to decide and look into.
No, I wrote it down. It's a
Okay.
question I have to ask the architect.
Yeah.
I don't
You mean in terms of
typically
like
get involved.
containment?
Yes, the size of the
The
fuel
heating
storage
tank.
could be a problem with the aquifer overlay.
Correct.
Okay, so let me try to summarize. We're gonna do a site visit. Dave Roberts and Helena are going to get together, go through some architectural ideas and sort of get it to look a little bit more part of the environment. Mr. Gordon is gonna do a memorandum of law.
No.
Okay,
Take a little think about this. Whether they need a new hydrologic study under the new law. That's the question is, right?
I think we should go with the law, read the law, go with the law, the sense of the law, but we should be practical.
I'll figure out how to deal with them, saying the
I'm not
question.
telling you how to do your lawyering.
I'm just saying the question is whether they need a new hydrologic study.
Okay. Site visits.
Hydrogeological,
One day we'll discuss.
Okay, guys.
because there is a hydrological study
Correct.
required in a different section of the.
Stop with the inside jokes.
He's trying to teach the attorney correct language.
What else did we agree to do with this? We are going to, when we do the decision, Dave. The uses that are being proposed, the other uses, we need to make it clear that. Those are the only additional uses.
As a condition.
As a condition,
Okay.
yes. And I think that's it. Okay.
So we'll get a list of those or some such
They
thing.
gave us the list.
They have a list in
It's
the
right, it's right
documentation.
in the narratives, right, in the, on
I don't
the
have any,
basement.
I don't have any of
Oh,
that, so.
they've sent it to us and
Oh,
on the
wait,
site.
it's digital, we're gonna get this?
No, it's in your Google Drive. It's
It
under
is
there.
already.
Yeah.
It's there already. It's under narrative.
Yeah.
In the file called narrative. Okay, so I'd like to see you back here on May 28th. When hopefully all the answers to everything we've discussed can be put on the table. And the board would be able to, move forward in a fashion in which they want to move. So the next thing, after we resolve all these issues, I think this is the most pregnant of the issues. How we're gonna deal with the aquifer protection zone.
In general, or just this hydrologic thing?
Hydrologic.
Okay, we'll take a look at it.
And we'll see if it's appropriate at that time to set the public hearing.
Perfect.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be in touch.
Oh, yeah. You have a phone number?
What is it?
845 88
238
8188.
8188. Okay.
Perfect. And we'll see you next week.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay, you were saying. Everything is in the Google Drive, Dave? It was loaded up.
Yeah, I just.
No, it's okay.
Wait a minute, so I didn't review.
Right, but it's all in. I didn't want to review, but I think we just need to summarize it. Okay, it's now 9:30. Okay, we got 5 minutes.
Hyper initiated.
We have never,
Concerned.
never finished this early, so.
Oh, Jennifer, have another comment.
Oh, yes, please. We can make it a good.
Very fundamental and long one.
I've been carrying this for a long time.
Alex had
I'm
an
gonna
hour
show you.
presentation, but I'm gonna tell him to stow it for the next time. So we'll do it next time. So I will entertain. I will entertain a motion.
I make a motion to what?
I will entertain a motion to retire,
No.
to adjourn.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Like you.
Somebody seconded it.
Second.
Peter's reminded me,
I'll second that if nobody else.
we're not finished. Have a seat. So Jerry is retiring, the inspector is retiring, so that rumor may be out there. It was confirmed. Doesn't matter when, last week's time that he will be retiring. I don't know what that means in terms of determinations. Alyssa is kind of an assistant CEO, I guess you could say, and she does a good job from my perspective. At least, doing determinations. So I don't know what the plan is. It is a civil service job, so if anybody wants to apply for it.
No,
it's a civil
thank
service job. I'm not gonna give you a job description because I think it's everything and everything that you're required to do. So just want to fill you in on that. Peter, was there anything else that, anybody else? Any comments before we formally adjourn with the vote?
I have a question. Can I take these to
Yes,
review?
go ahead, because you're gonna, so you're taking the ones for Ram Todd, right?
What's that?
You're taking the Ram Todd ones, right?
This is actually Ridgeview.
You take them,
Yeah.
whatever you need to take to do
Yeah.
our work, yes. And Peter, the same thing, so Robert, we may not have the same number, but for good reason, okay?
So we can take them sometimes,
You-
if it's
you-
like a,
If you need to do work with it, yes,
yeah, okay.
yeah, obviously,
Is that,
and in
for
fact,
some of
if,
these, it's helpful to see.
Yeah.
if you
can't work
want
on a
to-
Computer.
I'm flexible, if you want to before the meeting. Either come in and take one home overnight,
Be nice.
that's okay, you just need to pledge to me that you're gonna bring it back to the
Yeah.
meeting. Because we only get,
Sign up.
no, I'm not gonna go there, a library sign sheet,
No more sheets.
but I'm okay with that, but you gotta bring it back.
Yeah.
Because we only have a certain number. All right.
I make a motion to adjourn.
I did that already.
No, you're seconding it, you're firsting it. Let's do- All in favor? Thank you all for your patience.
It's 9:35.
Hard work.
It was 15 minutes ago.
Right out.
Turn us off. We are still online, so don't say anything
No,
untoward.
we're not.
All right, that's.
Are we out? Are we off? All right, so.
Whatever they're doing at that gravel mine across from Meta.
Oh, Superdome.